Good evening. I'm sorry we have kept you waiting for a moment. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First, what we'd like to do is we'd like to take a moment of silence for the victims and their families of the Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. So if we could please just take a moment. As we reflect on this tragedy and the aftermath, lessons learned and recommendations for school districts across the country, the need for increased services in the areas of safety, security, mental health, social work, etc., it becomes increasingly obvious that doing more and expecting to spend less is simply unrealistic. Multiple media outlets have been sharing the expectations that schools should be doing more. We've received questions and comments from parents, understandably concerned. At Great Valley, we are very fortunate and blessed that we have systems and protocols in place. That said, we are continually vigilant and evaluative. It really was a tragedy, and in education, I've learned in my years on the board that we are one big family across the nation, no matter what state we are with. And we lost a lot of kids, a lot of parents, and a lot of heroes. Great Valley mourns each and every one of them. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our presentations. The board met in executive session prior to. Mr. Barrett is traveling for business. The point of our executive session was for legal and personnel issues. Thank you. Okay, Secretary's correspondence.
Yes, I just have one bit of sad correspondence. I have to report that one of our former teachers, Paula Landrum, passed away recently. She was first grade most recently at Sugartown, retired in June of 2016. She'd been with us since '92, working at Katie Markley in Sugartown. I had the opportunity to work with her and her husband through as they were getting ready to retire, and I have to say, I actually was in her classroom meeting with her a couple times on this with her husband, and what a lovely lady. If you had the opportunity, if your first grader had the opportunity to have her, you really were blessed. She was just a genuinely caring teacher, and somebody that would make it feel warm for every first grader. So that's it.
Thank you. And it is always very sad. I know she did leave her mark here, and she'll be missed. Chester County Intermediate Unit report is me. The board meets tomorrow, both in executive session and for their monthly board meeting. They also will have new board member education tomorrow prior to the meeting, and we will get our pictures taken. So I will have a report as to what occurred during all of that at our next business meeting in March. Legislative report, Mrs. Ravenfeld.
We have a rather robust report this month. The state legislature was in session February 4th, 5th, and 6th. They have not been in session since then, and they will not return until mid-March when the budget hearing process is concluded. Well, Governor Wolf's relatively tame 2018-19 budget proposal hasn't generated a significant amount of pushback. There are lots of questions about the shale tax component that is baked into its revenue numbers. Additionally, we're still working to get answers to questions regarding how most of the additional dollars proposed for career and technical education would be driven out. But it appears that the administration is still formulating details in this area. Upcoming budget hearings could provide some elucidation on this issue and others. Budget hearings, which kick off next week, are likely to generate some additional talking points on both sides of the aisle regarding the governor's proposal. PDE will testify to the Senate and House Appropriations Committee in early March. For the congressional redistricting issue, a lot of funds going on there, if you've been following it. Since the PA Supreme Court decision in January that the congressional maps were unconstitutional and needed to be redrawn for use in the May 2018 primary, things have been a tad bit chaotic in Harrisburg. With the legislature given a February 9th deadline to submit a new map to Governor Wolf, the Republicans submitted a proposal that was barely met by that deadline that Governor Wolf rejected earlier this week. With the governor's expert determining that the Republican map wasn't significantly better than the original map, Governor Wolf submitted his own map to the PA Supreme Court just before midnight on February 15th, last Thursday. What happens next in this ongoing saga is unclear. There have been rumors of a potential appeal by Republicans, a delayed 2018 primary, and just about everything in between. But one thing is for sure, nothing is ever easy in Harrisburg. And to unpack that redistricting issue a little bit, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said that the former map or the current map was unconstitutional. The legislature redrew it. The governor rejected that map the legislature redrew. Then the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, the PA Supreme Court, redrew the map, and the Pennsylvania Republicans asked the U.S. Supreme Court to put a stay to that. The United States Supreme Court refused to hear that because they felt that it was the Pennsylvania Supreme Court rendering a decision on PA Constitution. They don't want to get involved in anything that is not Pennsylvania. They don't want to step into Pennsylvania's purview is what they don't want to do. They want to allow Pennsylvania legislature and Supreme Court to handle things that deal with Pennsylvania state constitution. However, now the Republicans are saying, well, it affects voting, which is a federal issue, and that's why they're hoping to move things up through the United States Supreme Court. PDE guidance changes to section 1337 under Act 55. The Pennsylvania Department of Education provided some additional clarification in the form of some additional frequently asked questions on the changes to section 1337 in Act 55, the food shaming component of the school code bill. The additional FAQs would cover several topics, including assessing penalties on unpaid accounts and accepting donations. And finally, I'm really happy to report that the school board came together and with a consultation with the administration, expressed a lot of concern about the prevalence of vaping among students in the Great Valley School District. So with the assistance of Representative Dwayne Milne, we have been having discussion about how we can come together, not only as a school district, but in concert with other districts to look at legislation that will help reinforce our school code and our school policies that make vaping and any electronic delivery device for anything, nicotine or otherwise, illegal on school property. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
I'm really sorry I messed this up, but Mrs. Salvatico is here with our General Wayne children to present to us tonight, and she is really under the weather, so I'm going to change things around here so that we can bring General Wayne up because y'all look so great tonight, and then Mrs. Salvatico can go home and get what she needs, get the rest that she needs. So I'm going to bring up General Wayne. Can't wait. Come on up.
Good Good evening. My name is Emma Caldwell, and I'm the president of the General Wayne Elementary School Student Council. With me tonight is our Vice President Cameron Suta, Secretary Caitlin McGuire, and Treasurer Sylvia Brewer. Thank you for inviting us to share some of the wonderful things happening at General Wayne. In December, we held our annual Jingle Bell necklace sale. We sold over 300 necklaces, resulting in sales of $332. $105 went to the Ronald McDonald House at Al DuPont Hospital, which paid for a family to stay for a week at no charge. In addition, we also held our annual teddy bear drive. We collected 81 stuffed animals, which we donate also to Al DuPont Hospital. The stuffed animals are given to children who are hospitalized over the holidays. Everyone needs a furry friend to cuddle when they don't feel well. We are working on a new project to continue to make our school beautiful as well as growing as accountable General Wayne citizens. The students have noticed trash on our playground, so we have proposed buying a trash can, possibly decorating it and placing it on our playground so students and visitors to our playground can throw their trash out properly. In addition, all the students, staff, and teachers at General Wayne have made a kindness pledge. Our media club, along with our student council, have captured our General Wayne family sharing words of kindness, which is shown over our TV monitors to remind everyone how choosing kind matters. This year, we have incorporated weekly spirit days each Wednesday. The first Wednesday of each month celebrates our General Wayne spirit by wearing green and white of General Wayne Spirit Way. Some of the Spirit Wear days include Kindness Day, where we will all wear a word or phrase on our shirts, which promotes kindness. Animal Day, and during the month of April, we will support autism awareness by wearing blue and white, rainbow colors, and any item that supports autism awareness. Report for tomorrow, Wednesday, February 21st, 2018. Warm with a high of 73, but a whiteout for General Wayne. Go General Wayne Eagles Spirit. Lastly, we are getting ready to begin our Cards That Care school-wide service project. Each student illustrates a picture that promotes kindness and our pillars of character, which are printed and created into a card. The students then color and create their 6-pack of cards, which are sold. All proceeds support a General Wayne family in need. Thank you for inviting us to share our General Wayne pride this evening. We are honored. Have a fabulous week.
Thank you so much, General Wayne. It amazes all of us when we sit up here and we hear the wonderful things our children are doing. Empower children and they will do great, great things. And we have the best children on the entire planet. Thank you, General Wayne. Mrs. Salvatico, please go home and get yourself some rest. Thank you again. We'll have Mrs. Armstrong give a facilities report.
Did anybody have any questions for Mrs. Ravenfeld for the
I didn't think
legislative?
anybody
Okay, awesome.
did. We're good? Before, did Mr. Milne leave?
Yes.
Dwayne?
I wanted to just see if maybe there was
Something that he wanted to let us know that we might be looking for, but I didn't get him quick enough. But that's fine. Mrs. Armstrong?
Sure. We had our facilities meeting on Tuesday, February 13th of this year, 2018. We reviewed the 5- and 10-year projected plans for facilities maintenance, including the need for long-term funding. And I know that we'll be discussing this in more detail at the March work session, but we will definitely be bringing that back for you. This year, along with some of our other things that we already talked about at the last meeting, we have 2 more unforeseen projects, which is the boiler at Charlestown and another sinkhole at the high school. We also focused on some new projects, including the high school tennis courts, the artificial turf in the stadium, the concrete work that has to be done at the middle school, and the visitors concession stand at the high school, the stadium where the turf is. And finally, we looked over the proposed and ongoing developments in each municipality. The administration met with the municipal leaders on January 24th and plan to have a follow-up meeting on April 25th, and then we'll report out again after the April 25th meeting. I believe that we are canceling our March meeting, Mr. Linderman. So our next meeting will be in April. Do you know the date of that off the top of your head? April 9th for facilities. So anybody who's interested, please feel free.
And I keep getting knocked off of this. Okay, so next we will have our IT report, which will be Mr. Pollock.
Met on Tuesday, February 13th. The meeting served as an opportunity for the subcommittee members to experience 2 applications that are used in Great Valley classrooms. The subcommittee participated in an interactive activity using the web application Desmos. Dr. O'Toole led the committee through an activity about the systems of equations and showed members how students can respond online in real time. Committee members also signed into Canvas in a sample course where we reviewed an assignment, submitted answers to a survey, and assessed a posted link. The subcommittee discussed the option of using our meetings to highlight specific applications that teachers are using to support instruction. We discussed inviting students to help us review the app and then answer questions that the subcommittee may have. The committee looks forward to tonight's meeting, where high school teachers will share their experiences with iPads and the one-on-one initiative. The subcommittee continues to invite questions and thoughts from the board for consideration at all times. Dave and I were at the meeting, and Dr. O'Toole did a good job of just showing us through applications. We had a lot of questions, and it was kind of fun because he was able to kind of pretend he was a classroom teacher and we were students. We talk a lot about these applications during our meetings, and we don't, as a board, we don't really see it every day. So it's good for us just to kind of get experience with it, so that when things come up for if we're going to be buying the software next year, we know the value behind it.
Okay. Other reports? So we have. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get everything in a row here. Now we're going to hear from Ms. Field, our student representative.
Hello. Last week, the instrumental concert was a success despite minor panics with the lighting in the auditorium. The high school student council hasn't had any recent meetings, but underclassmen are starting to do course selection for next year, which is exciting. And the student council is preparing for Mr. Great Valley, including deciding on performers and teacher judges. Also, the wrestling team and basketball team are continuing their seasons. 5 wrestlers qualified and will be going to districts later this week. And we will be cheering on the boys basketball team in their playoff game on Wednesday against Pottsgrove.
Sounds like you're busy in the high school. Superintendent's report. Dr. Polubinski, Speaker Polubinski.
Thank you, Mrs. Burrell. Our first presentation deals with the additional budget information from the work session meeting. So at last week's meeting, we had discussed, you can switch it if you'd like. That's okay. No problem. At last week's meeting, we had discussed a number of things. It was quite a lengthy conversation, and there were a few directives that were presented to the administration, one of which was what makes up the additional $5.9 million in the budget, what specifically makes up that information, and then moving on to what would it look like if we removed things from the budget? I just wanted to make it very clear because apparently there was some lack of clarity in the budget proposal that was provided previously. So if there's any lack of clarity moving forward, the information in the budget that was proposed, I believe in working with the administration that proposed budget is in fact what I am recommending. So I just want to be very clear that in recommending any major cuts, that is not in line with my recommendation as the instructional leader. I was required to couch that information, therefore the information I'm providing you tonight is giving those opportunities for further review if in fact the board would choose to peruse them. So in the first slide, you'll see what makes up the additional $5.9 million. I can tell you none of the additional cost is due to any increase in programs. We are not initiating any programs. The costs are to maintain and continue doing what we've already set out to do. So you'll see there the salaries, the employee benefits, and when we're talking about salary and employee benefits, Mr. Ferre had a great point last week in talking about contract negotiations. We have not added money for salary and benefits because those negotiations are happening now. So we don't have outcome data to drive accuracy in those numbers. It's certainly as we've talked about, 78 to 79% of our budget is based on salaries and benefits, so on personnel. So it is certainly an area that we want to make sure we're spending a whole lot of time in those negotiations. And as a reminder, Mr. Barrett had shared last week, those negotiations are being led by Mr. Sultanic, who is our contract attorney in concert at the direction of the board. So the negotiations are between the GVEA and the school board. Going down professional services, those are those services in which we contract. So personal care aides, IU programs, translation, legal fees, substitute nurses, contracted employees, which are custodial. So those are line items in the budget, and actually they're making up the additional costs as we look at what we've spent over the last few years. As costs go up, those costs go up, and that would be the additional money represented.
Regina, I just wanna-
Absolutely.
So this is the increase in each of those areas, not the total spent in each of those areas,
Right, this is the
correct?
additional
So I just
money.
want to make sure.
Yes.
So the IU, and for me personally, and I'm only speaking for me, the IU programs, that's 1.3 million, right?
Yes.
That the IU is charging us in addition to what we normally pay to the IU for
Yes,
this
and
upcoming year.
just so we're clear,
It's another part of the special ed budget. I mean, overshadowed is the PCA budget, but the intermediate unit program budget is much larger than the personal care aid budget. And it's another budget where we continue to not be able to catch up with what was spent in the prior year. As we budget and think we're budgeting appropriately, more and more programs and more costs are added at the intermediate unit. And it just kind of inflates these costs, so.
And this is for FAPE, correct? I mean, the reason we contract out with the IU.
it's
For the
not
special
only,
ed.
okay, and I want to be clear, the IU programs constitute a few arms. So in the IU programs, we have special education, we have technical education, so the technical college, high school. We have employees that are contracted through, like our clerical aides or instructional aides that are contracted through a sub-agency of the IU. And the reason we contract those services is as increased benefit costs with PSERS and healthcare it becomes much more fiscally responsible to contract those services out where we can. So it's not only special education.
I'm going to just speak for myself and say that if that can get divvied up a little bit more, that's
Absolutely.
helpful for me. That's a very large, like, I understand that the personal care aides are the mandated aides, and that's mandated by the students' IEPs.
Yes.
But it sounds like the IU program has a little mix in there, and that's a pretty large number. So I'm not, I mean, if the rest of the board doesn't want it, but for me, I would
That's not
really
at all a problem
appreciate
to break it down into subsets.
what the buckets are,
It's a-
the big buckets.
It's a total of around $4 million. I don't have it in front of me. A lot of it goes to, I don't want to correct the superintendent, but the technical education and all, that's on the next page. That's in a different area. But the, what is in there is the classes at the intermediate unit at the CDC. Those are very high-level classes where a student there would cost us deep into the six figures. It's all of the occupational therapy, physical therapy, things like that, services that are done for all of our special ed IEPs and 504s and things like that are all rolled into that. So we can break that out as best we can. And there are classes, for example, part of that part of that cost would be for special education students attending the tech school. We talked about the vocational aspect, we talked about the academic aspect, but another third prong at the tech school is if a student goes there with special ed needs and they're there for a full day rather than a half day, they get provided that there. So it's another kind of part of a plan or of an FTE that gets added on, a pretty high cost one over at the vocational technical school. So we can break that out.
Right, we'll talk a little bit more about costs of special education versus regular education as we go through the slides.
Chuck, CDC and FTD, I promised the board this meeting that we were not going to speak in our little, what we know and not everybody else does.
Yeah,
So
the
if you could-
CDC is the Child Development Center. It's our most severely needy students that are educated by our intermediate unit. Now, you also see some numbers for students that go to approved private schools and students that go to private residential rehab institutes. Those are different. Those are even more expensive placements. The CDC students would have a myriad of physical and mental disabilities that are far above and beyond what we can provide here. So we transport them to the Child Development Center, which is in Coatesville, up by, behind Coatesville. It's in between Cash and the Coca-Cola, what used to be the old Coca-Cola plant there. So,
The next page you'll see the other contract services. So other schools, as Mr. Linderman had shared, the approved private schools, the VOTEC school, charter schools, private residential schools, and adjudicated students. How it works if students are adjudicated, so the court puts a child into a school other than ours, we are billed for the educational component of that service. And typically it happens, the service is delivered by the school that is the agency within the placement. Transportation, capital equipment, the tech capital budget is moved to the general fund. Our debt and other financing, again, it's moved to the general fund for tech, or the general fund tech budget. Books and supplies, and purchased property. So would anyone like any additional information on these slides?
Are these negative numbers for the purchase property?
Yes. Would you explain that a little bit more, Mr. Linderman?
yes, as we continue to monitor those budgets, Mr. Abraham and I continue to get updates from our energy purveyor, and electricity continues to go down in price. Not too long ago, we were spending over $1 million a year on electricity. We're down to a budget of just over $500,000 now. Natural gas continues to be the way for us to heat our buildings. We have a secondary system of number 2 heating oil, which also heats but we use that as a backup at this point. It just hasn't been, the price has been much better with the natural gas versus the fuel oil. We do have to burn fuel oil now and then when it got really cold. I think I talked about this at one of the meetings. We have an interruptible agreement with PICO where they can tell us to switch from gas so that all of you that have gas in your homes don't run out, or they have plenty to supply. We interrupt and go to fuel oil for that time period. Generally, it's a weekend. We've been fortunate with that. So we're running fuel oil on those times.
I have a question on the other contract services, the other schools. That's a large increase. Is it because there's more kids going to those schools, or those schools have increased their rates?
A little of both. In charter schools, it's the rates, because we really haven't increased the number of students in charter schools. We've actually been going down. It's kind of flattened out a little bit. We're about back down to where we were in 2009. You know, we saw a spike in that during 2010 and 11 and 12, and it started coming down. But we do have more students in what we call APS, which is approved private schools, and as Dr. Speaker Pawlowski said, adjudicated students, some years we will have zero, some years we will have a lot. It just really depends. And the private residential, they're called PRRI, Private Residential Rehab Institutes. They are the most pricey. That's where a student is placed on our behalf somewhere to be a residential student, so it is a very pricey. So as you get, it only takes one or two of them to actually add hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And the reality is, as far as the approved private schools, the private residential schools, the adjudicated students, we have very little control of that. Oftentimes, we will find out after students are placed, if they're placed outside of us. Now, for some, it's an offer of fate, which that's the level of service and programming that child needs. So then it's an IEP team decision, and we go into that understanding. But
and not too many years ago, and Regina would probably remember this, almost all of those type students, the state would share the cost either on a 40-60 or 60. It was 60-40, then it changed to 40-60, and then it changed to, in most cases, it's 0-100, meaning you pay the 100. So that is an area that has really kind of escalated in all school budgets, because the state share of that component of special ed has dried up.
And as we talk, and we talked about this in finance, we talked about this in October, and we will talk about it again in March when Dr. Wexler presents the special education budget. The proposal or the line was that the government was going to provide 40% of the funding for special education costs. That is in nowhere near where we are, and we'll show those numbers. It was presented to the CPAC as well, the Special Education Parent Advisory Council. But that is, the approved private schools is a very strong example. Most recently, it was a 60-40, meaning the state would reimburse districts 60% of the cost of the approved private school. The next iteration was a 40-60, where the state would reimburse the school districts 40% of the total cost. What Mr. Linderman was just referring to is the situation we're in now, where it is a 0-100%, which the state reimburses 0% of the total cost. Now, once a child is in an approved private school, you cannot move the child because you don't want to pay. That is not allowable under Chapter 14 in Pennsylvania. So it becomes really incumbent to really monitor, and Dr. Wexler and her team do an amazing job in going in and making sure it truly is the least restrictive environment and the most appropriate placement. So that happens on a very, very continual basis. Any other questions on?
Regina, I have a question. I just want you to make sure my rollout is accurate. So basically what these two slides show is, for instance, I know in capital expenditures, we've got $800,000 we know we had to spend. So these are actually, they're not for additional programs, like, these aren't additional IU programs. We've had our IU in place, our programs. Translation, substitute nurses. I mean, all these things are increases in costs of things that already existed, and that's what's making up the 5.9 million?
Yes, again, we are not adding any programs. And a lot of, if you remember in our conversations, and we spoke again about it last week, the realignment of staff to not add when we needed to. So we, our STEAM initiative, 2 of our middle school teachers were moved from the middle school to the elementary schools to provide that resource. And that is what we are continually doing. And I just want to make it very clear that we are constantly reviewing programs and finding ways to maximize our resources while meeting the needs without compromising our programs. And again, if I'm directed to do so and provide you with all the programs that aren't mandated, I certainly will, and that's coming up in the slide. I cannot, in good conscience, recommend that. So I just want to make that incredibly clear.
Okay, let's go.
The years at a glance, and I am adding this slide because it matters. You can see our enrollment numbers, our professional staff, our number of retirements. The areas that I really want to focus on are increases in those services outside of what we do for universal instructional design for all students. So for what we do beyond what our programs are for all kids, 4,181 of them. Of those 4,181, we also have, and some are, it's not unique numbers, so we could have crossover, but you can see the increase in need. And with additional supports, whether it's special education, gifted education, 504s, or English language learners, with additional supports come additional costs, most notably personnel, which is our most expensive additional resource. As we move on to the next slide.
Gina, can we go back to that for a second? So just running the numbers really quick, if you look at this current year, 39.9% of our students, 40% of our students have some need that is being addressed in some contractual manner, correct?
It is not that clear cut. You're on the right track,
Okay,
Mary, because there could be some overlap. They're not all unique students.
Okay, so ballpark it, let's ballpark it.
I would say low end 30% of our students.
Versus the year after my oldest son graduated, you had 24.5%. That's still ridiculously high. That in a district, and I've said this before to this board, in a district like Great Valley, that we have that percentage of students that need support, it's just unfathomable to me. And what is causing, I know there are many factors, but why, and in the next slide is, jumped ahead, in relationship to our competimates, neighboring districts, what is causing this? Do we have a handle on why this proliferation of need?
Well, I can tell you, and I'm glad you asked the question, Mary. I can tell you the qualification is not unique to Great Valley. So for example, there's a qualifying number to be identified with a disability. That's not a Great Valley thing. That is an achievement, an aptitude test, or doctor's referral. There are 14 different disability categories. So if a student moves into our district and they have documentation of being a student with autism, they qualify for special education services. So there are 14 different disability categories. So it could be speech and language, it could be hearing, it could be vision, it could be intellectual disability, autism, learning disability, OHI, which is on the increase, that's other health impairment, which could be an ADHD diagnosis. So there are a lot of variables at play, one of them being the over-identification nationally of ADHD and autism. And that is not that's not unique to Great Valley. The other English language learners, we have an increased number of students who receive English language learning support. That number makes up those students who take a nationally validated test, which is the WIDA. It's not, Great Valley is not determining that. The test is administered, The evaluation dictates whether or not a student, what level of support they receive. And based upon that level, it dictates the number of consults with additional support. So the 504s, that is for access, and that is under Chapter 15, and that is typically health involved. So if a student would need additional supports, more visits to the nurse, set of books at home, elevator, key, all those kind of access issues, and gifted support. Again, there's a qualifier that gets a student identified as receiving gifted services. So none of these things are CBAs or curriculum-based assessments. That informs the evaluation process, but all of these metrics that are used are nationally normed. So it's not that we're over-identifying because the assessments that we're using are assessments that are used nationally. So as we go on to the next slide, if we could, which is the one you were referring to, is the demographic comparison. The one that probably, in research, indicates the greatest degree of need is economic disadvantage. And that is economically disadvantaged, which is ED, which is the second from the right. That is based on the number of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. Again, I believe for all of those districts that are up there, that percentage is deflated, because in order to qualify for free and reduced lunch, the parents have to complete the forms to get it. So you have a number of folks who may qualify for free and reduced lunch and choose not to submit the forms. And that's not only in Great Valley, that's, again, nationally. But there is significant evidence that economic disadvantage creates disparity at the starting point of a child's educational experience. So there's a huge gap by the time they're 5 years old that we have not been able to close, and mostly in language, by the time a child who comes from economic disadvantaged background into our schools. So much of that can sometimes trigger the special education issue and deflate the gifted education issue. If a child was in a different environment, would they have more propensity to higher academics? There's a whole lot of research on that. That's not why we're here. But for the purposes of a budget analysis, it triggers a lot of other resources that are needed to close the gap. So as we go, you can see, and why this matters if we move to the next slide. The charter school formula in Pennsylvania, just to give you an idea, this isn't a Great Valley thing. Great Valley did not make this up. This is the funding formula for charter schools. If a child is in our school and they go to a charter school, the formula that we use, we are billed by the charter school for approximately $13,000 if the child is a student without an IEP or a student without an identified disability. If a child could be the same exact grade level, has an IEP, we are billed $30,000 for that student. So on average, what the state is saying by that formula, and the national formula is not much different, is it costs more than double to educate a child with an IEP. So when we're talking about special education costs, again, that is not a Great Valley thing, that is a reality. There are a lot of requirements that go along with that. Class size is one of them, the number of students on a caseload, the programs that you use, the number of meetings that you hold, the number of evaluations which are generated by school psychologists, the number of additional related services, which can be transportation, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language support, nursing services, personal care assistance, one-on-one aides that are not personal care assistants. The list goes on and on. Special devices. Our responsibility is to level the playing field for students and provide a free and appropriate public education. So if they have a plan, we have an obligation. And I'm not making excuses or defending it. It is what it is, and it's in the numbers. So I just want to understand, I just want everybody to be clear as why do I keep showing the demographic differences? If we're going to be compared and say, why are we spending more money per student if we have larger students with higher costs, we're going to be spending more money. And that's the reality, and it's just math. Now, moving forward, the associated costs of programs and services. I was asked to share with you what things we don't need. If we choose to eliminate the offerings, the programs or services on this slide, we will not be violating any mandates. And with the exception of physical education, we could not completely eliminate that, but we could greatly reduce it. The requirement is at the elementary level, we provide physical education one time a week or a cycle every year. Middle school, it's one time, and secondary, it's one time. The state is very clear that they don't dictate number of minutes or number of credits. That's left up to local control. So this is where, if you remember last week, when I was asked to present to you things, these are the things, this is the list. The caveat was also, how do we remain where we are and as competitive as we are? I can tell you, eliminating those things would be taking us in the opposite direction. And I'll share on the next slide why I believe that to be true.
Can I just,
Absolutely.
you know how my mind works. So what you're saying is the budget that you have given us include all these things.
Absolutely.
If this board says, Dr. Speaker Paula Binsky, we need to cut $3 million, then we will have to come back to you after evaluating that list with ourselves and our community and decide what programs, like when we took programs out of elementary schools for languages, the board then would have to decide by looking at this list what they wanted to let go. Is that basically what you're saying?
Absolutely. And it was mentioned last week that to review our programs and find out what we no longer need, we continually, and as Dr. O'Toole will share with you with the program of studies, we do that on a continual basis. We don't, and what you'll see is there are some courses that are removed from the course catalog at the secondary level because they do not seem to be meeting the needs of the students. Not the needs of the students today, but the needs of where the students will be when they leave us. So we get feedback from colleges, universities, and businesses telling us this would give your students an edge. So we're going to replace certain math programs that we're offering with programs that are more aligned to what students will be entering into rather than where they are now. And we are continually doing that, and that's what the program of studies reflects. There is a consequence for every, and I just want to make sure that I'm very clear because there's been a lack of understanding. There are implications to cutting those things. I feel it's my responsibility to share that with you.
I also will have to say at this point, Regina, that I believe you've demonstrated that your team does continually evaluate, because as we just saw, the increase in the budget is 5.9%, and it truly is not for anything that has been added. Now, the board knows because we get the presentations as to what we're doing in our schools. So we know you are implementing other things and you are moving people around. So you've demonstrated that your team does that. So I appreciate seeing that.
Thank you. One of the things, and some of the parents are aware of this because they received feedback on this, we had some teachers that were able to pick up other programs. As you saw, our numbers are increasing. Some of them are defined by regulation, caseload regulation. So when our caseloads go up, very honestly, many districts will add staff. Caseloads go up, you need so many students per teacher, and if you go over that, you are held, you can find yourself in corrective action. So what the team has done, and it's not me, it's mostly Dr. Gafredo, Dr. O'Toole, Dr. Wexler, the principals, and the teaching and learning department, looked to see where we can double staff, where we can utilize people in multiple ways. And that has happened most recently in the last 2 weeks. And I thank the principals working really hard with our amazing teachers who have stepped up to the plate and taken over students on caseloads outside of their curricular area to do that. And that will continue to happen. We realize that we're in realistic economic times when we're thinking about being having fiduciary responsibility. That said, I think we have to be careful and strategic. The considerations that I just wanted to, because these were brought up last week, and I want to make sure that we're all understanding the larger picture. The biggest legislation, or the legislation that many districts are afraid of, is that of school choice, such as vouchers, which is being discussed at the federal level, where parents would receive funding to send their children to schools other than the public school, and charters. The way to combat that legislation, I feel very strongly about, is to make sure your school is the school of choice. And I can tell you, when you strip the things that many students come to school for, and I think Millie can agree to this, if we removed all of those things, like music, like drama, like all of the athletics, all of the extra opportunities for students, and simply brought students in for reading and mathematics and the core subjects, I believe we would not be the school of choice, and then we would really be in a situation where we would have to worry about such things as vouchers and charters. We're not in that position. As you can see, our enrollment is growing, and from my perspective, that is a great problem to have. We are a school of choice, and I think in order to keep it that way, we have to make sure we maintain our programs while being fiscally responsible and evaluative of effectiveness. The second consideration is the foundational supports. I had spoken to you a little bit about this. Sometimes we make knee-jerk reactions, and in education, we're known for it. We try to cut something without thinking of implications. That is a definite way to put yourself in a position, and the typical response is 2 to 3 years later, you find yourself overutilizing resources to make up for decisions. So, and that just happened. I thank Dr. Wexler and her team. We are off corrective action, but it was a 3-year process to make that happen. And that creates more resources. One of the processes that is being put in place, it's much farther along at the elementary schools with the pre-referral process. And what I mean by that, as Mary had said, why are so many students? Why are our numbers raising? Quite frankly, in 1990, it was required that all schools had an instructional support process, which was a pre-referral process to special education, which required 60 days to figure it out. 60 days to bring parents in, to work really hard to say what supports and accommodations can make this child successful, and does a child really need an IEP for that to happen? That was a 5-year mandate. Many school districts kept it on, or some facsimile thereof, for a number of years after. By 2005, 2006, many schools had dropped it off because it was no longer being monitored, it was no longer required, and it was one of those things that went by the wayside. With that, what it ended up happening is when students experience a problem, a child gets evaluated. There is no time between the time of the need and the time of the evaluation. That, to me, is a foundational support we need to implement again. Dr. Wexler is doing that with her team, but that requires additional resources, which is what we had talked about with the school psychologists and what is happening now with the supports and the resources that we have. But we're going to continue down that path if we have to go slower because we can't make it happen with the additional resources that we requested. We'll continue that process because that will pay off in dividends down the road. It's not only financially responsible, it's the right thing to do for children. And we're going to continue to do that work independent of a budget presentation.
Is part of that not having that pre-referral process how we got in trouble with some of those articulated? Because I remember you were saying that Great Valley kind of tried to implement something like circumventing. And then we ended up, it may have been cheaper when it was initially instituted, but more recently we have been paying in the six figures to correct that problem. Mandated payment.
That's not
for
part of the
that.
pre-referral process.
But I mean,
Exactly.
because we didn't have this whole pre-referral process in place.
Well, what had happened, I believe it was 2012-13, not quite sure of the year because I was not here. What had happened was we were put on corrective action for LRE, which is least restrictive environment, meaning that too many of our students were receiving supports in an environment that wasn't as close to their general education classroom. So that was what we were on corrective action primarily for. So plans had to be put in place. And one of the reactions to that was to minimize or lower the number of students receiving special education services. Speech and language is a special education service. So in lieu of giving an IEP for speech and language, students were given articulation plans. They were receiving service, there was no harm done, which was found in the report. So students were receiving services, they just weren't receiving services on an IEP. So it changed our reporting numbers, which in the short term looked good. The problem with that, when that was identified that a number of our students were on articulation plans, the corrective action, and this is all public, the corrective action for that was to reevaluate all students. So you noticed the speech and language increase. We had to reevaluate all students and offer those students, do a determination if compensatory education was required. So it was a quite expensive backup. We are fine now. We've gotten a clean bill of health where that's concerned, but that's just an example of making sure that your reaction doesn't create a problem down the road, because it will not be a problem. You won't see it immediately. It's typically 2 to 3 years down the road that you'll see the issue. The third consideration, as we talked about, the contract negotiation uncertainty, that is currently taking place with Mr. Sultanic and the GVEA leadership at the direction of the board. Where that ends up is uncertain. It's also important to think about in contract negotiations, and Mr. Sultanic is very, very seasoned at this, so he's really good at directing the board and working with the board and the board directing him. But sometimes what appears as a good thing initially, it's really important to put cost containment language in, and in the last contract negotiation or the last contract extension that was done in 2015, that language was put in. It seemed very innocuous at the time, but it is a very, very strong cost containment language, which says it's about horizontal movement. So as we talk about contract negotiation, it's important to understand a lot of the good work that you have done in the last couple years. And again, sometimes that work isn't realized or that isn't seen.
So, board members, we've gotten a lot of info. I think all of which we asked for. We see the list. Chuck, could we put the associated cost of programs list back up, please? Basically, we see the list. Superintendent's telling us that her recommendation is to not lose anything. In the event that we want to cut the budget from what is recommended by the admin to us, this is work we are going to have to do. So there's the list. If there's anything anybody would like to see come back at the work session as far as specific costs of programs, or are we going to talk now whether we would like to see?
I would love to see if we could continue to put some pressure in the area of technical education with the CCIU to try to get costs down there. I feel like that's an area where there is savings to be had.
Well, and I just want to remind you that we spoke about at the last meeting, we talked about the technical education and the additional costs that were shared with us. We are not planning on having those costs, so we've already cut them from the budget. So that's not included in, that is one
Thank you,
that.
I've forgotten about that, so thank you.
Yes. So that is one that is already cut, and that was one that we didn't even propose. Once we saw that language in there, we immediately started addressing that. I shouldn't say we, high school administration, and I thank Mr. Flick and his team, working with the guidance counselors to make sure that that is not going to be added to the budget. So it's not included.
I still, and I know you have this from before, it would still be very helpful for me in that IU number to have that blowout.
Absolutely, yes, we have that down.
I just want to comment that academics are very important, but I think it's very important to me and to our community, and I'm speaking from just my anecdotal talking to people, to have all these additional programs. That's one of the reasons our school district is as good as it is. I'd be interested in knowing if there's a way to reduce the cost in delivering any of them, but I would be vehemently against, eliminating any of them.
I think I can say with pretty good certainty, I think in the past, there may have been times when we've overpaid for things. I do not believe we do any longer. I think that this board and this administration has done a good job from the fiduciary standpoint of really bringing forth more than one choice so that we can get the best value all the way around with everything that we're doing. I think at this point, we need to decide if we are leaning toward cuts. That would be something that we as a board have to discuss and do. That is not at the hands of the administration. We cannot expect our top administrator to read our minds. I think it's clear that if we're looking at cuts, we are looking at changing our cultural makeup of Great Valley. I don't know that we're ready to do that, but I think we need to talk about it because the administration, as they build this budget, we need to instruct them as to how they go on. So we do need to give them some idea as to where we want them to go. And I think we do need to discuss it as a whole.
Can I propose though that we do that at the finance meeting?
I think we need to make a decision as to that, whether we're going to go that direction or not, because the finance meeting, these people have work to do, and we can't, they did a lot of work in the last week. They need a direction as to where we're leaning, because say we want to know what would it cost, what would we save if we took music out? It's a lot of work for them. So I think that if that is where we're leaning, we need to get them working on that now. So just a couple minute discussion as to where are you looking? We did have a mission as a board to remain 10th, if not first. Our superintendent's telling us if we take things out of our programs, we will likely not do that. We just do need to give them some direction. So do we want to keep trying to refine what we have, or are there numbers on that list that people really want to see?
If I could just clarify, I just want to make sure, because those that weren't involved in the conversation, the reason there are not associated costs with each of these is it is much more voluminous than would be expected. So we have transportation costs. What has to happen, you have to pull out from transportation costs, any costs are associated with a plan. So if you have a child with a disability, you must provide transportation. So with that come so I did ask, I did contact the board leadership to determine if that was something. I was directed at that point to put up the list of programs and services, and the board would direct if they would like a drill down of actual dollar amounts. Because when you're talking about programs, you're talking about personnel associated with that, as well as equipment, as well as rooms. So it's a little more than just a staff number or an automatic number that can be generated. So I just want to clarify why there are not dollar amounts. We will take the time, if that is at the pleasure of the board, to put numbers by certain programs if that's what you'd like, but that's been the direction I've been given by board leadership.
So a little discussion as to where do we seem to be heading. The administration certainly will do the work if we want to see that. I don't want to see them, nobody wants to see them do the work for nothing.
Can I chime in? I would like to keep these things. I also feel like we should be having a discussion, even though it costs money, every few years about kindergarten. My kids will be past the age when this benefits them, so this isn't a personal thing. I just think that in order to remain competitive with other districts, I think it's something that we want to look at the research behind offering full day versus half day, and also the cost. So I'm happy to keep these in here. I'm happy to keep budget increase no more than 2.4%. That's where I stand.
Mary, can we hear from you?
To weigh in on this, I think there are too many variables right now. I do agree that we don't want to change the landscape of the district too much, but at the same time, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the costs that are associated with the services we provide. And I'm just going to be very frank about that. It just seems astronomical, and I'm trying to get past that. I'm trying to get beyond that it is what it is. But something's got to give, and I don't know what that is, so I'm not ready to weigh in on that right now.
So then I think I'm hearing you say we continue to try to hone in our numbers as best as we can, but there isn't anything you want specifically on that list pulled out and broken down money-wise? If there is, we just need to tell them now.
I just want to clarify, when we're talking kindergarten on this list, it's different than kindergarten that Ms. Gunderson is talking about. Okay, good, okay.
Mrs. Yuan?
Yeah, sure. I think it was pretty clear when I spoke up before. I believe that we need all of those programs, and I don't feel the need to see the detailed costs of them because I can't imagine not having them as part of what we offer. I think people choose to move here because of our great school district, whether they have kids or they just want a house with a good value, and part of that is, as we all know, having a great school district, and that's more than academics, and having all these things, I think, are kind of baseline for us at this point.
Mr. Foray?
Whoops, pressed the wrong button. I want to keep coming back to the point that I've raised every budget cycle. As I'm sitting here again, I spoke about it last week, but STEAM, STEM. Can we talk about that? And I'm looking at some of the other programs up there, and they look like they're kind of the same. I'm wondering, again, whether or not certain of those programs cannot be consolidated into the current focus of STEAM in our school. So, for example, science, technology, engineering, arts, math. I see art is right underneath STEAM, and I guess I'm trying to understand why that's bifurcated out. Why family, consumer science, and technical education is not wrapped up into the T of the STEAM for technology. And are these different programs? Are they the same programs? And if there's a way to consolidate those into a quote-unquote full-on STEAM program that is based and focused on a 21st century education. Whether or not you want to spend time coming up with numbers on that, I don't know if there's savings there. I can't tell because I can't see anything up there that makes sense to me because I don't understand why some of those are broken out. If we're focusing on STEAM, like it seems like all of those things should be generally consolidated and update into a 21st century education.
It's just like like this S in STEAM is for science. We also offer science. So it's, when we talk about family and consumer science and technical education, that's more at the actual class of STEAM happens at the elementary level. And family and consumer science is more a secondary, as is technical education. So I definitely understand the confusion. The actual STEAM is the special area program that's offered at the elementary one day a cycle. So I certainly understand when you pull apart the acronym why that would be confusing, but it's not duplicative. It's differing levels and it's differing special areas and what they focus on.
And parent feedback for STEAM has just been phenomenal. Like that's one consistent thing that I've heard is people love this program. So.
And I guess we can, I don't know if that answer is what I'm looking for, but we can revisit that. The other is, and when you go back on slide 3, there's some points on slide 2 that kind of bridge onto slide 3. I see contract services, and you know, in my line of business, when I see a contract, the first thing I think about is we're going to negotiate. We're going to get the best deal we can get. Are these costs that we're looking at negotiable? I understand approved private schools, and I understand we approve contracts for certain placements, for settlements, for children with special needs. I understand that, and most, I would say probably all the time, we get the best deal that we can negotiate. But some of these other schools, charter schools, I guess those prices are defined by the state law, that's locked in. But do we have any negotiation power? Or are we just kind of like passive users of a system where we just come up and say, we have 3 kids that we need this specific placement, let us know how much it's going to cost and just write a check? Or do we have the ability to kind of shop around for the best school, the best price? And you know, I look at that, and you know, I'm just kind of picking on contract services here, but other things as well. Are we getting the best deal that we can get on some of these very unique, specific spends?
As far as the contracted services go, there is a tuition cost. And what you'll notice whenever we have a settlement agreement, you're given that breakout. And very honestly, we do look around and provide options, and finance is a huge driver of that, but it's not as though there's a lot of variation in cost. Many of the approved private schools are very expensive. There's a specific reason for them, and they offer a very niche service, and they're approved for a reason. As far as the private residential schools, they are tuition-based, and they are incredibly expensive. That is a residential facility. And we are very, very careful, not only because it's extremely expensive, but because primarily it's not in the best interest for students oftentimes. So we have an LRE, that's very restrictive. A residential facility is very restrictive to a student. So when we talk about least restrictive environment, the only time that we would provide that is in cases where we feel as though that is the least restrictive environment that the child can be successful. So we have very few of them, but when as Mr. Linderman said, when that is the placement, or if a child moves into our district and that is where they are, they become our responsibility financially. So we inherit that IEP and that level of service. We certainly reevaluate that, and we reevaluate it continually, no less than 1 time a year, but it's a very costly contracted service.
Are they ever court mandated?
Yes. And typically for court mandated placements, we only pay a portion of that because typically they're court mandated for reasons other than education. So we get billed for the educational component of that.
So,
Gina, I'm just gonna hop back for 1 second, back to slide, I guess 7. Social work, can you expand on that a little bit? How does that differ from psychological services?
We have 3 social workers in our district, and those social workers provide services that are oftentimes written into IEPs or 504s. They also do threat assessments, risk assessments. They also provide in-class instruction when needed. It was very interesting as we were working on this presentation. I got the text from Mr. Flick about the high school shooting in Florida. And that is one service that many places have removed those services. And when you need those services, they jump from that bucket into contracted services. Or if unmet need, into placements. So you can be proactive and deal with the systems and build systems in that are proactive, or the reactive response is students that are placed in schools outside of ours because the need was not addressed and the support was not given.
Can you speak to the difference, though, between the because I know in
Yes.
layman's terms, a lot of people might think of psychologist, social worker kind of on that same kind of, and I don't believe in our arena, it's that
Thank you. So thank you, Marion. I'm sorry I didn't answer your question specifically. Social work services are delivered by social workers directly to students, and that involves counseling, services that are dealing with families. They deal with providing risk analysis, as I said, threat analysis to students. They work with teachers and working with students and their families. School psychologists they're certificated in the area of doing evaluations and also reevaluations, or as we talked about, the pre-referral processes, the pre-referral services and supports. So they're incredibly different. We have currently 5 school psychologists, and as you noticed last week, we also contract with school psychologists, and much of that is required because timelines are in Pennsylvania aligned to evaluations. So once an evaluation is signed, we have 60 days to have the evaluation report in the hands of the parent. So that clock ticks, and you get spikes in requests for evaluations. So if there are a large number of evaluations and you only have days of the week in order to evaluate, there are times that we have to have contracts in place that when we're in a pinch, we can call a school psychologist that is not our employee to do an evaluation.
And it's my understanding that those are calendar days, not business days.
Yes.
That-
It
so
used
you
to be
can't-
before
used to-
98, yes, it used to be school days, and that was much more doable. And in the reauthorization, it changed to calendar days, so you can imagine, it increased, it really stratified or collapsed the timeline.
So like if the school's on break, it's the spring break or whatever, the clock is still ticking.
Yes,
because
it
we're in
doesn't count
session.
over summer, but yes.
Because we're inside of our school year.
Absolutely.
The clock ticks every day that we're inside the school year, whether or not we're here or not here.
Yes.
Phil, did you get everything you need?
Yeah, kind of had a follow-up question with regard to the social workers and the psychologists. Are they paid under the teacher's contract, or are they Act 93 administrator employees?
They are currently in the GVEA.
Mr. Pollock, where are you heading?
Like Samantha, and I think I would definitely support all these programs. I do find some stuff that Phil said interesting. We have a lot of classes, I think, that in maybe like upper school where I'm curious how much the interest is and like how important those classes are when maybe kids could be going into more of the technical or engineering type classes. I know when we did the tour, I found that there was also some classes I saw that looked like they were underutilized. And I'm a little concerned that we're not utilizing all our teachers as much as we can, as much as possible.
Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. And we spoke a little bit about this last weekend at the Finance Committee meeting. The enrollment numbers are reported out on a monthly basis, and prior to, they've been reported out pretty typically at the elementary. So K to 5, you see how many students are in each class, and they're within the guidelines, and you've had people come and speak at public meetings to express when a class size is at the upper end of the guideline and the concern for that. One of the issues that we've been reporting is we are looking at class size guidelines and implementing them at the secondary level. That is new. That had not been done. And there was angst, and I know some board members got calls about this, that it was due to budget cuts that class sizes had gotten so large at the secondary level. It wasn't due to budget cuts. It was due to complying with class size guidelines that have been in place here since 1998. So Dr. O'Toole, Mr. Flick, Mr. Connors, Dr. Capitolo, Dr. Gaffredo, Teaching Learning Department under the direction of Mrs. Beck, they've been working very hard to look at balancing those classes and making sure they have the support. And much has gone into that transition. For the example, we stratified leveling. We had multiple levels, which caused very small class sizes. We aligned those, and there were a number of people coming to speak at the public meeting about their concern with getting rid of multiple levels. We are aligned to what colleges and universities are looking for as far as having an academic level, an honors level, and an AP level. We also have dual enrollment that are embedded into those, but it's really stratifying those programs and services that we offer. So we are continually working with, now we're going into program selection. I believe that is tomorrow evening at the high school. And if we don't have enough students in programs, those programs don't run. Those classes do not run. So it's a continual challenge to make sure we maximize our resources while at the same time giving the supports to the classrooms that need it. Our guideline is up to 30, and many of our classes for the first time this year are at that upper end of the guideline.
Well, what's the minimum, though?
26. It's a 26 to 30. So those classes, now we do have classes that run below 26. If they are specific classes, for example, there are certain computer labs that are fitted for 24. There are 24 seats, so we make sure we don't put 26 in those. There are certain AP courses or certain high-level classes. There are also certain classes with supports. Our special education, certain sections of special education are lower by regulation. But our goal is to schedule those classes to be within the guidelines. Now, that said, at the secondary, and those who have children in secondary, there's a whole lot of movement that happens at the secondary level. So students register, they get their schedule at the end of the school year for the following school year. What happened to us this year, a number of students took classes over the summer, so they matriculated through certain courses to get the prerequisite done in the summer through a university. They came in and were put into other classes because they transferred credits in. So all those variables happen at the secondary level those things don't happen at elementary. So we will continue to monitor those class sizes, and it's definitely on our radar.
Mrs. Armstrong, where are you looking?
Well, for me, I mean, we've talked about this before, and we know from Anecdotal and from talking to other colleges that they are looking for well-rounded students. That, when you have a student who's only academics, they have a disadvantage if they want to go to one of those Princeton Review schools, because they are looking for well-read. They want to know what they're going to bring to the campus community and the life at whatever university or college that the kids go to. So I have a difficult time with these areas unless we absolutely have to, because I can't see, I know for me, for kindergarten, I understand that if we don't have a strong kindergarten, even if it's only a half day, then that's going to cause more special ed and more supports needed as we go through, because the costs go up, because the disparity between those kids, it's harder to get over the older that they get. So that one's a hard one for me. Transportation is a hard one for me, just because I know that we have kids who won't be able to get to school, and then how do you deal with the truancy and the kids who can't go? So this is a tough one for me. I still would like to see, and I don't know what the format is for that, to make sure that we are delivering our programs in the most economical and the best way educationally. Is, like, as I had expressed before, for me, it's not a list, it's not a program necessarily. We got rid of block scheduling because we said, hey, this isn't what we need. We took a look at some of the other schedules and said, you know what, 2 sections of AP Bio with 9 kids in each section, not what we need. We may run AP Bio at 18 kids because it's one of those specialty classes, but we're not going to run 2 with 9 kids each. So are we maximizing that? Is our bell schedule where it should be so that we maximize the educational opportunities and the staff that we have? Like, are all of those things aligned? And I'm not sure that this is a 1 year, hey, we're going to know this by June, but for me, that's the thing. Is the team schedule in the middle school giving us the educational opportunities at the economic benefit the way that we want it to? Because for me, it's that. It's more like, let's look at our systems, and our system, not so much our programs, but our systems that are all antiquated, where we say, you know what, we can tweak this, we can do that. I mean, I've seen some interesting things when I've gone to the PSBA meeting in October with some other districts who might offer a combo English history AP class. And so they put them both together, and and the way that they leverage those teachers and the way they leverage that course content, that's not a 2-month thing, but is that something that then offers our students even more flexibility from a student side, but offers us also economic responsibility on our side. So that's the kind of thing that I'm more interested in hearing more about. I'm not sure if that forum is here in our meetings, if it's a committee, I don't know what that is, but for me, that's the kind of stuff that I think is very interesting to take a look at, and where our next set of savings for want, I see it.
And I think one of the things that we've done, and we will have this presented as we move forward, Mrs. Beck and Dr. O'Toole have been doing an amazing job, and one of the things that you've seen was the My Learning Plan, and what we've talked about, and we've shared this, but I'm realizing that we need to share more and more explicitly. What that does, Mrs. Beck has worked really closely with consultants in math and ELA, as well as the principals have worked really hard, and the administrative team does walkthroughs, which they go through collectively together to do that kind of thing. So are we evaluating our programs? Are we working with teachers to listen to what they have to say? We really have an amazing pool of educational experts in our district, and they have been incredibly responsive to working together. So what our goal is, that we have the kind of professional development we provide is then aligned to what the needs of the staff are, as well as what the needs are seen through walkthroughs. So if there's an area, this year our focus was on engagement, on student engagement. So it's not about what programs are offered or what services are offered, but how engaged are the students in those programs, and what supports do teachers need in the area of engagement. So those kinds of things are happening, and we'll make sure that some of the principals, I'm sure, can probably speak much more eloquently than I on the kinds of things they're doing in the classroom for that exact purpose.
So will you bring us back some of the things that would be helpful to give Mrs. Armstrong and the rest of us the information that would be valuable to know, that we could be certain that we could have a greater understanding as to how you're doing them, so that we have then the comfort level to know that they are being done? Because it's something that there's no number. We're not seeing a number for it.
Absolutely.
But it would be helpful, I think, for those kind of things to come back to us.
So just to clarify, what I will ask our team to work on is to give you what we're talking about when we talk about evaluation of instructional practices and programs, which is in the classroom, to increase effective instructional practices in the classroom. So I'll share that. You're going to see a great presentation this evening, just a little snippet of some amazing things that are happening. And I think we'll put together something to talk about what's happening in delivery.
And it is about delivery. It may not, and it's all about in the classroom, but it's also how we schedule. It's also pulling back then a level and saying, is the way that we schedule, is the way that we staff, is the way that we offer that at the best. It's not just the things in the room, like the teacher teaching and the teacher supports. I'm talking also about the structure that supports it.
Mrs. Chain.
Without repeating what many of my colleagues have said up here, I'll say assertively that I am not interested in cutting anything on that list. There's nothing about the Great Valley education that I want to come away as we move forward. That said, though, I think about the question that I always ask my team at work: are we doing the right work, and are we doing work right? I feel confident that we are doing the right work. I will always push us to ask, can we be doing the work that we're doing better? And I would like to see, I think what you're getting at is not one thing, it's not one report, it's not one, but a culture of how can we continually push ourselves to deliver the best programming we can as efficiently and effectively as possible, and celebrate the wins when we have them, and talk about how we're sort of reinvesting those wins back into an even richer education for our students.
Yes, thank you.
So having Amy say that, can you work that in to our overall being? Can you take what Amy just said and work in that type of dialogue so that it is always an ongoing thing as to knowing that what we're doing is right?
Yeah, and I don't want to put this all on Dr. Speaker Pawlowski and her team either. I think this is something that we as a team can help create an environment where this is a healthy and ongoing dialogue and not a gauntlet or a chopping block. This is a culture of healthy discussion.
Yeah.
And I can tell you one thing that I feel very strongly about, and I have to thank Mrs. Blake and her team for supporting this. Every month, I share with you a superintendent's update highlighting the amazing things that are happening across our district in all areas, academic, athletics, arts, and that would not be realized without many of those things. And I agree, we are constantly asking ourselves, can we do better? And the answer should always be, in my opinion, yes. And we should always be striving to find out what that looks like. I spent a day today with our Great Valley Teacher Leadership Academy and many of our administrators, and it is amazing the work and the commitment they have to the students of Great Valley, and I am honored to be a part of that. So we can absolutely weave it in, and I will continually share those highlights with you and up the frequency of doing that so that you can see the realization of your direction.
Okay, so I guess it's my turn here. I truly believe in the integrity of your team, Dr. Speaker Polubinski. Oh, and I'm really trying to get to a little higher level here with using last names, because I do believe that it sets the tone for respect between everyone, and sometimes that's a little problematic. So I think that we're going to try to set a better example of maintaining that high standard. So that's what I'm trying to do. Sometimes I forget people's names, so I apologize for that. But Dr. Speaker Polubinski, there's no doubt in my mind that you have a phenomenal team. These are hardworking educational professionals, and I'm grateful. You have done an incredible amount of work in the last week, and I really hate to charge you with anything for the next go-round, but I don't believe that I am ready to make a cultural shift to take anything off of that list. I agree with my colleagues, and I think most of us have said it. However, saying that, I do believe that my fiduciary obligation is to always look. And I would really like to see maybe something come back as to, if we were to change our class guidelines district-wide, what would that mean economically?
Are you mean increase them?
Yes, if we were to increase our class guidelines, what would that do to the economics of the budget?
Is this
I
the will
would
of
like
the board?
to, I was gonna say, I would, before she puts that kind of effort in there, I would like to define that and make sure that there is 5 members of the board that are up for increasing class guidelines, because that's a lot of work.
First off, I'm not saying that I want to increase class guidelines. I'm saying that as a board member, and I just have to say this, we've really, Dave and I, made a commitment this year to step it up on this board. I've been respectful, and I have let everyone speak here, so I've waited to take this microphone as last, so I'd ask for the same respect that I've given everyone else. I would like to see what the economic difference in the budget would be if we increased our class guidelines. Now, the definition to that in my mind is to whatever you believe will not affect the educational delivery. Now, of course, I know a classroom in Charlestown at 16 students, if we increase it to, and I'm not saying we have 16 students, but if we increase it to 25 students, of course, we're going to change the makeup. But I would like to know, and I'd like you guys to give it some thought, is that a place that we could look to come up with some savings? I'm not saying I want you to pull everything out and do the work. I'm just asking,
can I jump
is
in
it
for a minute?
a place?
So very respectfully, I think sometimes this board gets in trouble when when we have our own requests of the superintendent. And this is one where I feel like we need to talk as a board before we can direct the superintendent, because that's like me saying, hey, I really think we need a new middle school. I'd like you to look into building a middle school. Hey, I really want elementary languages to be back in. Hey, and I'm making this up, I don't really care about art, let's cut all that. Just bring those numbers back and let's see what it looks like. So I think that when we do make these things saying, hey, let's look at the changing class size, for example, we need to be on together as a board saying, hey, at least 5 of us want to do this. But to you asking her to do this without checking with us first, that's
I didn't ask her to do it, Steph. I said I would like to see. So now we have a discussion as to, do we have 5 votes for Ellen to be able to see what Ellen would like to see? This is called dialogue and communication. So Regina, I would like to see if that's a possibility. Or can we talk about it?
Okay, what I would recommend we do, what I can do, is bring back, independent of class size guidelines, the average cost of a staff member, and then you can extrapolate from that point. Because at every level, it will be dependent, and because that request would require policy change from the board. So it would be more than a cost analysis, but what we can certainly do is drill down to the average cost of a staff member. And then that would, because I really believe a lot of thought and work, again, I was not here, but I know there was a committee involved in this work and really looking at the research, and it took time, I believe, to come up with those class size guidelines. So they were identified to be in the best interest of the students relative to that level of learning. So I can provide the average cost of a staff member, and then if that would be helpful.
Maybe we can make it even easier. Do you believe that there's any cost savings if we were to look at changing the class size guidelines?
Again, with every change would come consequences of that change. So, for example, you'd have to ask yourself, so what would you do if the class size guidelines were changed? So we have had class size guidelines since 1998, and honestly, at the secondary level, it's not really impacted much of what's happened. So would changing the guidelines change the practice? And if the purpose of changing the guidelines and the practice is to maximize the number of human beings who can sit in the classroom, I don't believe that would be a cost savings that would be realized over time. Because what you would end up having are so many learning needs and more students identified with needs, and then those services would cost more than the original minimal cost savings you would have. So I think it's such a ambiguous kind of creation of a cost savings. So I don't believe it would be in the best interest of students or programs to manipulate class size guidelines at this point. I think a lot of research was done, and if in fact we want to enter into that conversation, I think the best place to start to do that would really recreate that process. So what is the research now for optimal learning numbers, and have that conversation. So we're not just changing the numbers to push more students into a room. And quite frankly, many of our rooms now are truly not suited for increasing class size guidelines. So you add a layer then of, you can have a higher class size guideline, but the physical number of bodies that can fit into a classroom can't meet that guideline. So
Then I'm fine. I don't really need any information unless the board wants to look at what you're suggesting.
So
the higher look would be.
There might be an opportunity. So for example, in college, some colleges have huge lectures. I went to Harvard College, we had Act 10, there were hundreds of people in that classroom, and guess what, we learned. But they had an auditorium, they had, support staff running it, it was not a cheap class, they had notes about, every single support was there. So if there were classes that were better suited, I'm not suggesting a dissection class for anatomy, it would be silly to have 100 people over one frog. But if you as an administrator say, hey, there's a few classes where I really think that, having them in the auditorium and to a larger population, if you come back and say, I think we can do this because either the homework that's assigned is different or we're not expecting the teachers to know the students, so they will not be writing college recommendations because they have 100 people in the classroom, I would take that. I'm not opposed to something, but if it makes sense, I don't want to say absolutely don't raise the class sizes because there may be someone we can. I just want to use your time wisely, and I'm worried we send you off on too many wild goose chases.
One of the things too, and I want to give the high school administration a lot of kudos for this, they do come up with creative ways to deliver instruction. For example, combining two teachers and using the Audion, when it makes instructional sense to do so. And we have gone outside.
What was that, the Audion?
The Audion.
Well, I don't know
It's a
what that
large
is.
instruction room in the high school.
No idea.
Yes, difficult to find as well. But that is an example of what you were referring to, but it's a guideline, it's not a cap. So I think that's really important to know that you can go above it, it's a guideline. So there are some classes when that makes instructional sense to do so and it maximizes the experience for students, that happens now in the high school.
So that's kind of where I'm going. I'm not necessarily looking at it from class size. I'm saying, are we delivering? It's kind of, I was kind of, the phrase lean process. Yes, and I mean that truly as a lean process kind of thing, that we are performing as much of the lean process as we can, given that we're an academic, and there are some things we have to do that irrespective of whether or not they make sense or not, they're mandated that way.
And we're getting there. We're continually evaluating that, and it's not something that just started happening.
Well, and I know that lean process is kind of a business thing that may or may not be as familiar of a concept for the academic world.
So what do we want back? Anything?
Absolutely. I believe one of the things that I heard Mary's concerned about, the high percentage of students who receive extra services, so I'm going to provide more information on that. Jen would like, Ms. Armstrong would like to have more information on the breakdown of the contracted services or the professional services under the IU costs. And the IU programs and the buckets, which buckets make up the IU programs. So we'll break that out. Right, yes.
If other people don't want to see it, I try and preface this.
I will tell you, though, that we have the ability as one of 9 when we are meeting, that if we need additional information to get us where we need to be, we do not need a majority on this board. So I'm happy with, as long as Dr. Speaker Polubinsky knows exactly what each one of us needs, she will provide it. So if there's anyone else right now that wants to see anything at all, let's let them know now so they can get prepared. We good? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to keep going?
Absolutely. Next is our one-to-one presentation, and I believe Dr. Hoffritz will be giving our overview, and I thank you for being here.
I'm sorry, Chuck. Thank you, sir. So a little change of pace from budgets to let's talk about instructional practices. And I wanted to first of all thank the board for letting us come back this month to talk about secondary one-to-one. If you remember last month, we were here talking about elementary and the influx. You got to see some presentations of from the teachers about how students are utilizing some of the apps and tools with the one-to-one. We're gonna take that to the next level as well in the secondary level. So first of all, I'd like to thank our 3 teachers, and I'll name them in a moment here, for their outstanding teachers at the high school. I got Joe Bradley, Alex Maxwell and Meredith Rieger. They're going to be presenting tonight. And very similar to what the tech subcommittee experienced, we're going to give you a little experience too. It won't be hands-on, but you'll see both a teacher's perspective and a student perspective of how the one-to-one is working at the high school. This is our second year in the one-to-one at the high school, so they've had some time to work through through some of the apps, which we're going to show you in a moment. But it is still a work in progress. So basically what we want to talk about is really the instructional enhancements and getting to that 21st century learning, working with collaboration, extension of the curriculum, and getting kids to think critically and interact with text, with the curriculum. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to share 3 common apps, or not all the apps we use, but there are 3 very common apps that we're using right now. The first one is Canvas. Brittany couldn't make it. She's actually moving today. But she and Meredith co-teach together, primarily English 9 and 10. And they're going to give a demonstration of what Canvas looks like, both on the teacher end and the student end. Next, we're going to take them to period 2, and that's going to be Joe Bradley. He's going to talk about OneNote. And Joe teaches biology and AP biology. And his piece will talk a lot about the collaboration space that happens within OneNote. And lastly, Alex Maxwell. She is a math teacher, algebra and algebra 2 primarily, is going to talk about Desmos, which is a graphing calculator, a graphing app that's really quite interactive. We're going to be playing as well. Jason and I are going to be playing as well. We're going to pretend to be students so you can see some of our interactions on the student end of it. So hopefully you'll give you a little bit of some interaction there. And if you're on your iPads, I think for the Desmos, you might actually be able to log in with us. We can try it and see what happens. We'll play around with it. So with that, we're going to start off with period 1, which is Meredith and Brittany's English period. So Chuck, if you wouldn't mind giving up your seat. You can. You want to get him? Just 1 second. We're going to actually have her log on to the computer and show you the teacher app.
Okay, so my name is Meredith Rieger, and I'm here showing you what Brittany Carlino and I have created in our 9th grade course. And this is what Canvas looks like on the inside. I'll stay within this course so as to make it less confusing, but I'll tell you that I didn't have any classes last year that had one-to-one. Last year I had 10th and 11th grade primarily, so I didn't have any kids with iPads during the day. When I came back this August, I had 4 out of my 5 classes, kids had iPads. I have 2 sections of 10th grade on my own. They had iPads last year, so they knew more than I did about what they could and could not. Of course, they don't always tell you what they can do. But so I, at the beginning of the year, was learning from them as I watched them, how they interacted with their iPads. And then I was telling the 9th graders, this is what you can do. I mean, I'll be like, I learned it 1st period and I'm teaching it 3rd period, because the kids are teaching me how they use stuff. And a lot of what I've put on here comes from, I try something, I see how the kids manipulate it. Like I might record on this app called Show Me a little like 5 to 10 minute lesson, and then I let kids view it, and then I see how they embed pieces of my lesson in their notes and how they write on it, and then I can change what I provide to them the next time to be more suited to how they want to use it. So it's interesting to note that our fall curriculum unit was a lot about illusions. And that's going to play into the assignment that you're going to see in a minute. And so the assignment that I'm going to show you, where are we here? We have the ability these are modules. And so like our current modules at the top, we're doing these book clubs around cultural capital books. We're reading a book in class. Kids are reading their own books in book clubs. But I wanted you to see the side tabs that whatever it is you want to do in Canvas, you probably can do it. You can make all different kinds of pages. We've minimized the number that kids can see, so they don't see all the grayed out ones, but we can still make, I can make a discussion, I just have to embed it within an assignment or a page that I'm going to use in some way. So we create these these pages of content that kids can look at and interact with. So, like here's a recent one. This one simply was all audio visual, where I took a picture of the book. This is what it looked like by the end, highlighting and writing on it and talking. So kids are using if they're in class doing it, they have their headphones, and if they're at home, they can listen out loud. But it also means they can stop if they need to listen, if they need to go more slowly, if they want to listen to something again. If we're going to utilize the content in this in tomorrow's lesson, so if a kid was absent and they didn't get it, they can go back and see it. If they just want a refresher on it, they can watch it again. They can watch it again the night before the test. You know, it provides a lot more. Like, I can't live in their house teaching them, but I can sort of, because I've created these sort of self-embedded moments. I can also create things in ways that like fit for things I have to provide for IEPs or 504s. Kids can have access to things in different sizes or different graphic organizers. I can make those available on Canvas. We can capture, like I said, for kids absent, they can capture stuff for them. So the pages look different depending on where I want to go to modules. Depending on what you're doing on them. That one was all audio visual. Some of them are really like word intensive. Like this one is got a lot of stuff, and kids are going to have to go through and read and respond to what it asks them to do. So the one that we're going to look at as a sample came as a sort of capstone, a really sort of lucky happenstance. We kind of made a sample version of it. The AFC Championship game, I don't know if you guys saw it, Jaguars, Patriots. In my household, we just put the TV on at the time the game was going to start, and I was lucky enough to see that there was this thing that they filmed, a 4-minute video with John Malkovich, in which he talks about, like, he's got a script, and he's unhappy with the script, and he's supposed to be introducing, it's a metatextual kind of thing, where he's like, I'm supposed to deliver this script about this game, and he says the script's terrible. It's got all these terrible words and phrases no one wants to hear, no one wants to say. And he said, well, this is what I would say instead. And he says, this is the oldest story ever. It is David versus Goliath. You know, it is the little guy, the Jacksonville Jaguars versus, he says, actually, I can quote it at this point, I've seen it so many times. You had 2 Goliaths. You got Belichick, you got Brady. And so, you know, this is before the game, of course, that they aired it, and he ends up saying, and so we put together a little set of questions. He ends up saying the thematic statement, the main message of it is at the end. He says, anything can happen. You know, this is what, you know, this is why we watch football, because it teaches us that anyone can win on any day. So this aired. And I couldn't stop thinking about it because we'd done this whole unit on understanding illusions. And then, so we came in and we created this. Kids were going to watch it. They were going to answer 3 very straightforward, you get them right or wrong kind of questions. So what's the illusion? How is the character using the illusion? And what's the main message? From there, we extended, and this is one of the great things, that for some kids, it might take them the whole time to just get the answer to those 3 down. But for some kids, they're ready to go on. And we then asked, of course, the most important question, which is, once the teams in the Super Bowl were set, does the same illusion apply to the Eagles? And this is actually very debatable when you talk about the Eagles going into the Super Bowl. Like, were they the underdog? Were they the David? Or, you know, were they a team that, well, I don't remember what their record was, 16-0? I don't know. They had a good record, right, for the season? So, not a, in any case. So so we had, like, could you use the same illusion? We did this assignment before the Super Bowl, so we didn't know the outcome yet. They had to do maybe some research. They could talk, their research could be talking to another kid. It didn't have to be like going to the experts. We then had them talk about their personal application, where a situation where they might have felt like David and against a Goliath. And actually, some kids talked about feeling like David going up against their bio test. And the final one, which was the metatextual question, like why? Why make it a movie about a movie? Why make it about making a movie? So we only had, out of 60 kids, we only had about 6 total attempt this challenge, but for them it was a really meaningful, that was where they got, that was the real puzzle they were solving that made it fun. So is this where you want to?
Yeah, so I'm gonna just kind of continue here, hopefully. Just so you guys know, we had some magic occur right now. Meredith was on her computer, and if you can see, I'm actually broadcasting my iPad. I'm using a program called Air Server to broadcast it onto her computer. And so I'm gonna go in kind of as a student experience, and I love the illusion. And if you guys, like tonight, if you take the opportunity, this John Malkovich speech is really amazing.
It's awesome, yeah.
I would take the time to watch it.
And it's 3 minutes and 43 seconds, so you're not going to waste it a ton of
Yeah,
time.
and it's a quick look, but I just thought it was super powerful. So I'm going in now as a student responding to her response, or to her questions. And in Canvas, what's kind of nice about it is that they have this feature that allows you to write directly on a PDF. So we have the module we call the board meeting because it's for the board meeting. I'm going to go to the module, and if you can see, it says click here to download the assignment. So I've already started kind of creating some notes on the PDF, but I'm just going to maximize this a little bit. And you can see that I have the ability to answer directly. The writing in the red are my responses to her questions. And if you guys see at the kind of upper left-hand corner, there's a pencil with a box. If I tap on that, that opens up this menu of choices where I can annotate the text, I can type in it, I can respond in any way that I want. And then when I'm done, I can just click on, there's a submit button, which is the square with the little arrow going up, and I can submit it right to Canvas. And then Meredith would be able to read my response. And I actually did take it seriously, and I did try to answer the last question. It's probably incorrect, but I gave it my best effort. And I like I said, I think the illusion that John Malkovich says, and just kind of the way that, for me, my response was kind of the metatextuality was the fact that the true artistry happened when he was quote unquote off script. And sometimes in football the same thing happens. The true artistry happens when the play kind of falls apart and the quarterback is just scrambling around and just makes something happen. And at the end of the clip, what happens is they have this clip where Malkovich gives this impassioned, beautiful speech, and there's a director there, and he's watching the speech, and he turns to his assistant, and he said, "Well, did you record that?" And the assistant says, "Well, no one said to hit record." So they miss the whole thing, and so part of my response is also, like if you look away from the game for just a minute, you may miss, that moment of artistry. Where the play falls apart and the quarterback makes the amazing play. So you can see that it gives you the ability to just kind of go and interact with the document, and the fact that they can embed the video right in the Canvas. I can watch the video. I can watch it, like Meredith was saying. What's really great about it, not only the video that is entertaining like that John Malkovich video, but instructional videos I can watch multiple times as needed. So that's just kind of a little bit of information about that. And with that, we're going to actually go to our second period, which is Mr. Bradley. And I'll stop air servering so he can
get him ready?
Yep.
This one. So what's nice about Canvas also that Meredith was touched on is the differentiation that can happen. So
Okay.
all this stuff can happen at home too, so they can rewatch the video. They're just not spending as much time constantly pushing that out during the instructional time. Some of that instructional time can come, off-site and can be reflected then too. So just some more information about how this extends beyond.
To like pull groups, I can stack my class schedule, so like within it, I might have 3 groups. Kids might be rotating through doing something independently, working with me on something that's lesson related, or maybe some other skill that I know the kids need to work on. This is time when I can get them alone, pull them to work, like writing conferences or, a little grammar focused work, and then feed them back in where they have something that they're working on and they're accountable for, because they got to hit that submit button and send it back in when they're done working on it. So it operates to give me more flexibility to actually work like live and in person with kids, which seems counterintuitive. But the more I can sort of leverage that to spend more face time with the kid, for me is a win.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So we're gonna have Joe, go ahead.
Okay, so in biology class, obviously one of the things that you want to be able to do as much as possible, especially at a level like AP biology, is provide them with lots of resources, not just here's the textbook, read the textbook and figure it out. You want to give them as many opportunities to see the stuff in action. You want them to be doing laboratories, reading some firsthand things. And that's where the OneNote classroom space is really good. Basically, every one of these is kind of like Canvas. It's a blank canvas, except in Canvas it has the modules. This just gives me a blank space, and I can pretty much populate it with whatever I want. So what I try to do is keep myself very organized, or keep my students very organized, by having each one of the different units listed here that we're on. So the current unit that we're on right now is Unit 7. So they can see, all right, here's the different, I'll give them a calendar with here's what they're gonna be doing. And then as we go through, I add in different things, and I'll have students share with me, here's an interesting thing that I found. We found this, for example, this video right here that's a parody of the Despacito that kind of gives a whole highlight of the whole unit. And I can add in different things and stuff. As soon as I create something new, I can put it right here on the content library. So it gives me the opportunity to have my class be real time, not just what did I plan, 2 weeks ago or last year. I can update it as I go along, and then the students can see everything that I update. So we find something good, we can put it here and give them the opportunity to see it. So they have that. And I have 2 different classes. I have this class for AP Bio, which has a lot of different resources. The way I run the same content library for my Biology 1 class is much more concrete. Here's what we did on this day. Here's what we did on the next day. And they can actually download anything that we have done in the previous lessons, so they can see what the notes look like, what they should look like after the fact. Here's the homework key. So again, if they've been absent, they can kind of, as with Meredith's class, they can take home the day of class by having all this stuff that we've done. Sometimes, again, with my iPad, I can record myself giving a lesson and embed it right into here. So it does a lot of the same things that Canvas does. The one thing that I wanted to show that this does, that I can do, that I use this for, that I really like, is the collaboration space. So this is an example of a lab that we did where I had students, it was a relatively simple idea of a lab where they were trying to see what the amount of water that's in different types of potatoes. So they were comparing a sweet potato with a russet potato. So they had to cut it up into little pieces and measure how much the potato would change mass if you put it in different solutions of salt water. So each of these little treatments is a different solution of salt water. They create that, they do all that lab, and then each of these is a different group. So what's nice about that is that each group has an iPad at their lab table, and they take their data and they can put this data in as they go along, collecting their data, have this all out here, and then they have to eventually make it into a graph that looks like this. Well, to do this and this all together would probably take a lot longer, but I can have them copy this, paste it right into Excel, make the graph, and they can all do this, you know, in a relatively short amount of time with their iPads right there. And we can do this for all the different labs. You know, one of the labs that I'm doing right now, they planted different types of plants. So each of these represents a different plant, and they've collected the data on each of those. So again, where you see these are all different students that have put in the data about a plant. It's, again, kind of a boring concept, but it's they're able to collect the data relatively quickly because of this. And with this particular lab, they have 2 different classes that they then have to collect all these results, figure out the standard deviation, and they actually, what they're doing with these plants is they're breeding them to select for one particular characteristic. So they only breed the ones that have the higher numbers. And then the next generation, they're going to be measuring to see if, by breeding just the ones that had the higher numbers of trichomes, if in the next generation they will produce more trichomes. So they're, in essence, doing the same thing that original farmers did when they took brassica and turned it into broccoli or to cauliflower, things like that. They're selectively breeding, and they're measuring the outcome, so they're applying some mathematics into that. So that's what the collaboration space, when I had to do that before, even when I did a lab like this in college, it was, you know, you go up to a whiteboard and then you have to make sure that you're copying it down into your notes, and then you're putting it into Excel. This kind of puts everything into like one seamless package. So those are the other things. The last thing is actually how the students can work with this. So I'm going to go into the teacher-only section, but it's very similar to the students. So they can also add pages. They can go into the content library, download the stuff, and then add it into a page, and then put it in a bunch of other things as they want. And they can pull this stuff up anywhere they are. So once they put it into their own stuff, they can open up the app on their iPad and then see everything that they have done, and basically have the class wherever they need to have it. So.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
All right, and lastly, Alex Maxwell's going to come and speak to us about Desmos. I know we're running a little long, I'm sorry, but it's some really good information, and I'd like to have you guys actually see it and show it demonstrated.
Are we good?
Yep. All right, so I have Desmos, which Desmos, when I was student teaching however many years ago, was just a graphing calculator. So you could go on Desmos, you could type in y = x + 4, boom, the graph pops up, which is all fine and dandy, it's great. I use Desmos, my students use Desmos for graphing, but one thing that's really nice about Desmos now is they have what's called the activity builder, which is something that I use quite often. I teach Algebra 1 and Honors Algebra 2. So right now up on the screen are a bunch of different activities that I've done with my students throughout the year. So there's lots of different things you can do. One really cool aspect of Desmos is called the card sort. So previously, you know, I'm printing out 30, 40, however many students I have, 40 copies of an activity. I'm cutting them up, putting them into packets, and giving them out to students. But now with Desmos, I can do all of that on the iPad, and I can do all of that in the activity builder. So there's no more, I'm missing a card, I have a paper cut, I'm bleeding, I need to go to the nurse. Desmos kind of eliminates all of that, which is really convenient and nice. There's also something called the polygraph, which if you've ever played the game Guess Who, where you pick a person and then you try to ask your partner a question to eliminate, there's 30 people, try to eliminate them. Desmos has a polygraph, that's what it's called in Desmos, a student guess who. So they might have 30 graphs, and you're paired with somebody across the room, and you have to try to eliminate based on your mathematical vocabulary. Say, okay, does your graph go through the origin? And then your partner says yes or no, and they can eliminate graphs based on that. So polygraph is really fun. It's also really good for a pre-assessment to see what mathematical vocabulary your students are coming into your class with. Another cool thing is I can start our activity. So if anybody wants to participate with any sort of device, you can go to student.desmos.com and type in that code, which Jason and Marshall are going to do for us, or already have. But if you're interested and you would like to try it out, you're more than welcome to log in with the code. You do not need to create an account for this, which is nice, unless you want to revisit your work. But yeah, once you have an activity and you have students in here, this is my teacher dashboard. So one thing that's very nice and convenient is, one, Desmos has activities already built. There are activities Desmos puts their stamp on and says we approve these activities. There are activities that students or that teachers create and put out there for other teachers to use, or you can create your own. A very nice feature is that I can take an activity and duplicate it and then change it if I want. So if I see something where there's 10 slides and I only like the first 3, I can duplicate it and delete the other ones I don't need. So right now, as you see, we've got all these people logging in. If there's a blue box, that's the screen you're on. If there's an X next to your name, that means on that screen you might not have gotten that question correct. If there's a dot, that means you are solid, you're good to go. So again, you can put anything you want in here. This activity that I have now, this is a teacher view, so I can see what everybody's doing. I can show you the student view. So the question is, consider the system of linear equations, drag your point, show your solution, okay? And explain your thinking, which is something, explain your thinking, something that definitely trips up a lot of students, because I truly believe, and I'm truly trying to change this in my classroom, we do math, but we don't talk about math. So Desmos has this social aspect where you can explain your thinking and talk about the math behind your solution. And then something that's also really nice, let's see if I can pull it up, is you have all of your students, they explain their thinking, and other students can see their thinking, other students' thinking. So it has that social aspect, which, we talk about 21st century learning, we talk about collaboration, and how our students are going to be in situations where they're going to have to talk and collaborate and comment on other students. So not only can they see what other students are saying, there is a feature where you can have students comment on other people's responses. You can turn that on or off, which I think is a great feature that Desmos has. So another thing that's great is I can build in, oh, look at this. I can build in graphs. So it's saying sketch a system whose solution is -1, 3. So Jason here has his solution, and it wrote, this is my system of equations. Okay? So you can have those sort of create aspects to this. And then also, we have a card sort here. So this is what the student would see. Pair each graph with its solution, and leave the rest of the ordered pairs unsorted. So there's also more options than are necessary. So you can kind of see, are those students just matching, A to B, C to D, et cetera? But there are extra options, so it kind of leaves a little more of a challenge for students. And then from the teacher perspective, I can then see, okay, look, on everyone in green, they've matched things correctly. The red ones are incorrect. So Jason's writing things on his graph, he's just putting things together.
Look at his.
And then a really cool feature, which I just found out about recently, was this overview. So I can see the most common incorrect groups. So if I have 10 students with the same incorrect groups, boom, that triggers me to say they missed something, which is really prevalent. Let's see if I can find it. So this is actually one of my classes that I did this same activity with. So most common incorrect groups were a single line, and they said the solution was 0, 0. So then what I can do as a teacher is I can pause everybody at the same time, and I can put this up on the screen and say, all right, well, what's our thinking behind this, and why isn't our thinking correct, and how can we kind of fix your thinking and fix common mistakes, which is something that I think is really cool. Most common incorrect cards. So yeah, between the pausing, I use that a lot, and you can also anonymize students. So all of these names up here are actually famous mathematicians. So if you ever want to put up a student response and you want them to be anonymous, then you can just anonymize them and put their response up and either talk about how it's a really great response or how maybe we could fix their response or change it to either answer the question or go over a common misconception.
Thank you.
Board members, any questions for the team?
I don't have any questions. I'm so excited that you brought this because we've been talking about this for so long in such an abstract way that to actually see it is really cool. And I think I still have a lot of interaction with kids in high school based on the things that I do outside of my work life, and they are so much more technologically connected. You know, we laughed that we could program the VCRs, right? They laugh because they don't need textbooks, and we're like, but I want the thing in my hand, and they're like, I don't want any of that, right? And the world is moving so quickly towards this, and it's nice to see how much we are embedding this, because I think this is where we go. This is like, I'm on go-to meetings all the time where we have to do all this virtual stuff with each other and take polls and do all kinds of stuff. And for them to be exposed to this before they hit the work world and understand that all this is really coming, like whether you like it or not, I think it's awesome.
Thank you, and I just want to take the opportunity right now to just thank the 3 teachers that came to present. And just kind of to piggyback off of what Dr. Speaker Polbinski said, that we have an amazing pool of educational experts, and I believe that you, the 3 of you, are examples of that, and I'm honored to be able to serve with such talented teachers. And for us, I feel like the opportunities to collaborate and to work in ways that are different with the technology that we have is just such an amazing blessing. And I find that in my world of work that I'm using these tools all the time. You know, I collaborate with Marshall or with Tricia or Steve, you know, and I can just type, you know, we can be working on the same document, talking on the phone, you know, miles apart, and just kind of see what we're doing, and as we're doing it, we can say, oh, I can see what you're thinking. You know, that's exactly what I was thinking. So it's a really great resource, and thank you for the time. The one thing that we did kind of go over quickly was the 4th period was an early dismissal, so we're hoping for that. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much. You guys really did a wonderful job. Teachers, we really appreciate seeing everything in action. It really gives us great perspective as to how these things work in the classroom, and that helps us actually. We do get a lot of questions as to, well, what is this? And if we don't see it, so we greatly appreciate you coming and presenting for us. Thank you.
And
Jason,
Ellen,
Marshall, thank you.
If I could just add one more comment.
Yes.
I just recently wrapped up a grad school program, and a large component of it was supposed to be online learning and leverage of technology for educational instruction. And you guys just beat everything I did over several years of grad school in a few minutes. So you're using technology the way it should be used, not the way people are claiming to use it. So hats off.
Now we'll have our superintendent's report.
And I just want to honor Mr. Rasmussen's request. Please feel free to, I know you're going to hit it early tomorrow morning, so thank you. The early dismissal, absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Anyone who needs to leave, please.
In our superintendent's update, and once again, some of this is informational and some of this is just saying, wow, good things happening. Our first slide, kindergarten registration for the, if you can believe it, 2018-2019 school year. I think someone has someone that needs to make an appointment. One less child at home. Kindergarten registration is scheduled for February 26th through March 2nd. All registration appointments are held in this building, district office, and the available hours are from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. through 3 p.m. An appointment is required, and families are asked to follow the two-step process on the district website. Building-based science fairs, many of our students, and as I'm sure you've received in the weekly updates to the board, many of our students have competed at the local level in science fairs in each of our schools. Some very talented winners will be competing at the county level in March. So more to come on the amazing work of our students in the areas of science. PMA ensembles. The Great Valley High School students auditioned this past fall with musicians from Chester, Delaware, and Philadelphia counties for the Pennsylvania Music Education Association. District 12 Chorus Band and Orchestra honor ensembles. 20 Great Valley High School students were selected for 24 spots. So 20 of our students were selected for 24 overall spots.
Wow.
Yes, 20 of our students. 11 students were selected for district chorus and 5 students for district band and 8 for district orchestra. I know I say this a lot, but if you are ever interested in amazing quality, free entertainment, lots to come. Check out the district calendar. Amazing display of talent and dedication by our students, and also kudos to their parents for supporting their gifts. A number of these students were selected to advance to region ensembles and could possibly progress to the all-state level. So more to come from those students. Great Valley Middle School, we had 2 students during the month of October. The Veterans of Foreign Wars ran a Patriots pen essay competition for students in Chester and Delaware counties. 2 of our students, the topic was America's Gift to My Generation. There were a total of 321 student entries, and from those, 22 students advanced to the district level of competition. Our 7th grade, Sajin, was elected a 2nd place winner at the district level. Congratulations. And the middle school student in the school's spelling bee, which is the 2nd picture, at the end of 26 rounds, yes, that is an all-time record of spelling bee rounds at the middle school, 7th grade student Krishna was named the champion. Good job to all the middle school spellers, and you'll see Krishna will be competing at the next level as well. 26 rounds, it speaks to his spelling ability as well as his stamina. The 218 Prudential Spirit of Community Award. Congratulations to middle school students Sahitya Sarish and Nadini Bhatt, who were named as finalists in that community awards in Pennsylvania. They worked together to create a project called Cards for Care, selling homemade greeting cards in exchange for charitable donations. After 3 months of selling their cards at school and community events, the girls were able to visit the Shriners Hospital in Philadelphia, where they made a donation of $600. So, amazing contribution. General Wayne Elementary School, the principal's reading night was held at Barnes & Noble in January, and that's really a special event if you've ever had an opportunity to participate. Mrs. Citron does a great job, not only of holding the event, but they also name a Frappuccino, I believe. It's green in honor of the General Wayne Green Eagle. And they have a contest to name it, and the students have a whole lot of fun. Unfortunately, we had a conflict this year, so I was unable to read, but that's a whole lot of fun to read as Piggy. Interesting. General Wayne Elementary School also held their annual PTO talent show on February 9th with 50 56 students participating in the event. Many parents said to me, hard to believe how much talent there is. 56 students, you can imagine. That was a long evening. The Jump Rope for Heart, KDM in Sugartown participated in Jump Rope for Heart's event this month. The events raised awareness about heart health and benefited the American Heart Association. Students and teachers jumped and danced their way around the gym to promote healthy living and cardiac fitness. And I have to say, both Mrs. Morris and Mr. Hammond were stars of their shows, respectively. Upcoming events in February, again, if you have time and would like to experience wonderful opportunities of showmanship of our children. February 22nd, this is a really fabulous event. Katie Markley Heritage Night is held at 6:30. February 23rd is the Sugartown Talent Show at General Wayne Elementary School. Thank you for utilization of that stage. Thank you, Mr. Hammond. February 26th, as we talked about through March 2nd, is kindergarten registration. That is in this building. Those times are available. February 27th, Charlestown 4th grade concert at 7 p.m. And February 28th, KDM 1st grade concert at 7 p.m. An amazing way to see talent. Then, if your calendar is more open in March, you also have many more opportunities. March 1st, busy day in the district. KDM, Scholastic Book Fair. This is where we celebrate Read Across America, starting on March 1st. Sugartown Dr. Seuss Night, General Read Across America Celebration, the high school seminar Guiding the College-Bound Athlete. That is not a Dr. Seuss event, but it is also held on March 1st. March 9th at the high school, Mr. Great Valley, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that from our student rep. March 12th, the Great Valley Learning Ed Venture, and that's held at the middle school at 6 p.m. March 14th, Sugartown Spring Musical. March 15th, early dismissal for parent conferences, and March 16th, there is no school for students for parent conferences. So we'll continue to update with exciting events and information.
Okay. May I read?
Absolutely.
from her? Thank you. I'm really sorry, but my computer, I had to give it to Eric. It needs some work. We'll have public participation, and I'd like to read, the Great Valley School Board welcomes community interest and involvement in the board meetings in order to allow for public comment by residents of the district at all meetings of the board, and following procedures will be followed. Public comment. It is requested that everyone addressing the board stand and state your name and address the issue to be addressed. Note that the public comment portion of the agenda is not designed to be a question and answer period. All questions will be received by the superintendent and the board. If appropriate, a report, update of questions recorded during a meeting will be shared at the next month's board meeting. We'd ask that all comments be respectful. And I will open this up if there's anyone having, wanting to make a comment on anything on the agenda. Please come forward. State your name. Are they sharing? No problem. Are they sharing their white time?
Bruce Chambers, 17 James Thomas Road. I want to talk about two of the items on the agenda for the board to vote on. And I'll preface my remarks on that with some background on that. We heard tonight that you need to spend $106 million next year. The superintendent says that she doesn't want to cut anything. I was quite upset that what I thought was asked of the administration at the last meeting was not presented today, which was supposed to be $1 to $2 million worth of cuts. I think any characterization of the budget and the spending in the district has to be looked at from the aspect of reality and common sense. And I'll state some things here for you. You're requesting a $30 million increase from just 6 years ago. That's an incredible amount. No matter how many people I speak to about that, they look at me in amazement and they don't believe me. They just don't believe that. They said that can't be. You're spending $24,000 per student, the most in the county. You have the highest teacher compensation package in the county. You have the lowest student-to-teacher ratio. You have a debt payment that's being reduced next year by $4.2 million, but yet we're not getting that back. You're keeping that. In the last 5 years, the assessed value of property in the district has increased by more than 2% a year, but yet you say that's not enough. You need more of our money. That's patently ridiculous, totally ridiculous. If you spent the same as TE, you could reduce your budget by $16 million. If you did the same with Unionville, you're talking $12 million. Westchester, $16 million. Downingtown, $28 million. I can't even say it, $28 million. And Owen Roberts, $20 million. And we're told you can't reduce the budget. That makes absolutely no sense, none at all. So what I'm bringing to you tonight is that you have two items on your thing to vote for. One is a contract with the North Group Consultants for team building for $6,500 for the school board and some of the people in the administration. It's hard to tell who the team building is for. The consultant is supposed to meet with the superintendent and Mr. O'Toole to determine the focus of the retreat, but it appears the retreat's for the board, which is confusing. So you're going to be moving from a smart to a smart, healthy team. You're going to build a cohesive leadership team, create clarity, over-communicate clarity, and reinforce clarity, all for $6,500. The second one is a educational agreement, educational agreement with some other company for $8,500 to conduct a one-day Pearl Harbor on the road workshop aboard the USS New Jersey in Camden, New Jersey. Said workshop is to include an overview presentation by Dr. McLaughlin to be held the evening prior to the workshop on June 14th, which probably means travel as well. It's a 3-page contract. That's the only thing that says what the contract's for. And we're told tonight there's no place for cuts. Come on, let's be real. I plead with the board, show me tonight that you have some fiscal restraint, and please vote against these. This expenditure, this is bordering on the insane. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. Ted Leisnering, 2575 Whitehorse Road, Berlin, PA. And I first want to start by thanking this board for your service. It's a tough job to get up here and go through what you go through hours on end. Bruce talked about the details of the budget. I'd like to talk about the process and maybe make 3 specific points. And the one that sticks out the most, I think, for me was the slide that was up there for the longest, and that was one that said associated costs of programs and services. On that slide, if you were looking at the camera up there, if somebody was looking in from outside, there were no costs. It was a list. How can you make budgetary decisions without the numbers? If a student had come into my finance class and brought this in as a presentation to me, I would have given them an F. I asked them to come up with the associated costs and show me the costs, and they gave me nothing. You get an F. And that's what I would give that report up there on the board. I think you need to demand more of Chuck Lindeman to give you those details. It's his job. He's done it for many, many years, for decades. He can give you the numbers. The second one, professional services, $2.4 million, an incredible amount of money. Bruce talked about it, and he knows the details. We all know that Bruce knows the details. He has one of the best accounting forensic minds I know, and he knows your budget as well or better than Chuck Lindeman. You need to demand what the numbers are inside the professional services and go over them. That's a good budgetary process. That is transparency. So far, you are not being transparent. And the public is seeing this, by the way. It's on TV. I'm being filmed right now. I'm on the record. And I'm there telling the public you're not getting a fair shake. You're not finding out what $100 million of taxpayer money is going for. You're sitting in here and just going over lists of programs and not telling us what you're spending on them. Finally, I'd like to remind you of one thing. In 2009, we faced an incredible financial crisis, and that will happen again. This happens in America. We're all ebullient over the stock market and taxes and the way everything's going. It's going to happen again. And if you keep going down the track you're going with the direction that this management that you've hired is taking you, you're going to be in the same position we were in 2009. This time around, it's going to be different because you're going to have such high salaried teachers here, you're going to have to furlough people. And that's going to be painful. That's not necessary now. It's not necessary now if you use good fiscally responsible budgetary actions. And that means looking at the numbers now and making cuts. And I didn't hear any of that tonight. I just heard a whitewash, a complete whitewash by the superintendent and the CFO. That's it. I'm really, really disappointed in what I saw here tonight. It was painful to watch. And I'd like to go to another school district, and I'm sure that their management is much more transparent, shows the number. It doesn't show you a list of programs with no numbers on it. No numbers.
Mr. Lysenring, can you please, you
Okay, I'd
have
like
3
to sum up
minutes?
by saying.
Thank you.
Okay. And Ellen, I'd like to remind you, the years you were up here at the podium coming in, we never shouted you down and we never cut you off. I'd like to,
I'm respectfully letting you know that you are over your 3 minutes, Ted. I want you to speak, but I need you to sum it up.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I've said enough. And it's all on the record. And the people that are going to watch this, hopefully they're going to listen to what I said and then write you and call you and make demands. This wasn't a budget meeting. It wasn't a budget discussion. Thank you.
Will there be any others? Okay, seeing none, we'll go right into the consent agenda items. We'd like to pull out 7.10. Mrs. Yuan has some questions or needs some additional info.
So that agenda item is the program approval of the program of studies. And I know it was discussed last week, and there was an overview of what was new. I just had additional questions on whether any other material changes that the parents or community would be concerned about, anything deleted that people would be concerned about specifically.
Yes, actually, there were changes that were not material, I guess, to some extent. Some parents may notice that course names have been shifted, and that was due to providing clarity for students as they're registering for courses. Some courses were identified as Course 1 or Course 2, for example, maybe in Gourmet Cooking 1, Gourmet Cooking 2. So we changed those to Fall and Spring just to provide students with options. I think one thing I want to make clear, and this was something that came up last year, and it may be a question parents come up with as they look at the program of studies, is that we are not eliminating honors courses and AP courses. As you look at the program of study, or if someone were to do a close comparison as I have, you may see that last year's program of study might have listed an honors course, say honors world history versus academic world history. Now what we've done is we have the program of study that identifies the world history and then embeds the course description for both the academic and honors within the program of study course description. So we're not eliminating honors. It's listed there. It shows that world history has a honors section and an academic section. It says AA, HRS, and that is consistent because some of our courses within the different subject areas last year didn't have that and some did, so we just wanted to have consistency. Other than that, there were courses that have been removed, and speaking with Mr. Flick and the administration at the high school, those courses that were removed were due to low enrollment, and as was discussed tonight and has been the practice as we started working on our program of study in the fall, in November, with both Mrs. Beck and Dr. Hoffritz working with the administrative team, working with the departments, we looked at programs that were no longer meeting our needs or our students' needs, and those programs have already been taken out of the program of studies. One example might be computer literacy electives. That computer literacy course was just not seeing students registering, so it's no longer in our program of studies. There are other courses that follow the same pattern. But other than that, don't expect questions to come up from parents or concerns. I don't know if there are questions or concerns that you know of or parents have contacted you. I want to make sure I address.
I just have a question. Looking at world history, that's only from 1700 on? Ninth grade required world history? And it's nothing about the Renaissance, it's nothing about the Mesopotamian era, anything, Egypt, any of that prior to 1700. It just like the world starts at 1700 and you move forward?
I'd have to get more specific information about the curriculum. I don't have specificity. The course in of itself has not changed. This is the same course that's been in existence, but I would have to get clarity from within our curriculum documents to provide that information.
That's great. I'd be interested to know what buttresses that in middle school.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you, that was really helpful, because my concern is people who are going to be upset that they were counting on a course not being there and it's not. So for the courses that are removed, that aren't used that much, someone was using them, do you have a way to guide them to something else? I mean, some things just don't make sense anymore, like you said, but other ways will it be clear to parents, to students, you thought about this when you were in ninth grade, now you're 11th and it's not there anymore, here's what you could do instead?
Right, most of the courses that we saw that we've taken off of the program of study were electives.
Okay.
So students have options to choose the electives during the course registration through Skyward, so they can have options. They will choose those electives, and a few of our electives do provide students with the option to repeat them. So those are options that students have if they were in an elective last year and want to take it again, or even within over 2 semesters, they have that option as well.
Do they still have the ability to talk to, I know when my kids were in the high school, hasn't been that long, if they really had course selection issues, you could go into guidance and go to your guidance counselor and say, these are the things I'm interested in, I can't quite figure out this giant thing, and I don't know when things are offered, because I'm assuming as we look towards being efficient in our delivery, as with all things in life, choices will have to be made. There are only so many sections in a day, and if you're trying to take 8 full-time year-long classes, you're going to have to, something will have to go. So I'm assuming that guidance is still around to help figure out the best way to make the jigsaw go for the students to try to get as much as they want. I mean, I know we have students that would take 15 classes a year if we would let them full-time classes, and then others who struggle to fill their schedules. So I know that there's a huge amount of change in there, and I know that some kids never need to talk to guidance, but guidance is still there if they need them.
Yes, guidance is there for the students and parents. We had a number of parents reach out even in the fall and talk to the guidance department around meeting their child's needs, having schedule changes. So all of that is a constant flow of communication between both the student and the teachers and the student and the guidance counselors, and sometimes the parents and the guidance counselors. Yes.
So does anyone else have anything else on 7.10 or any other thing on the consent agenda?
Stephen, I have a question. I'd like clarification at some point on United States history. Again, that starts at 1900. I'm trusting that a lot of that's rolled up into the 9th grade course, but it just, couple big things happen in America for about 150 years there before that. So it's kind of strange to me that it is not included in at least this course definition.
We'll definitely take a look at the program of study course description in the sense of matching it up to our curriculum again.
I'm not sure, Mary, if I can clarify a little bit, because you and I have walked the same paths on some of these history classes before. I don't think it's the course description of the high school history. I think it's the history curriculum as a continuum from the middle school through the high school. So I don't want you to spend time looking at the description. I think the idea is that the world didn't just form itself in 1700 or form
No.
itself in 1900, and so how do we backfill through the middle school? I think it's, because you and I, we've participated in these in years past, so I apologize for stepping on toes, but I think that's what.
Right, and, sure, and we do have the continuum of standards that are addressed, and I know for sure, in our middle school, we do address,
I'm just going to say for me,
periods
I
before
remember when we took a
1700.
look at curriculum, and this is probably a few years ago, one of our biggest concerns was when we thought that there were going to be keystones for certain things that we severely aligned curriculum, and we were worried that there were going to be significant gaps in world history. And now that there aren't keystones, maybe that's a presentation. I'm only asking for me and potentially for Mary, but I think that that's a presentation at some point that I would love to hear again.
But nothing you need to keep 7.10 out of the consent agenda? We're okay with moving 7.10? Okay.
I have a question on another one, 7.08, which was brought, 7.08 was brought up in public comment, and I had also noticed it in my pre-review. I would agree that from someone looking in from the outside, it would seem surprising that a team building activity needs to be, on a ship in Camden, and I wonder if team building is important. We do it where I work, we do it in lots of places, and lots of organizations do it, but I wonder if there is a way to save money on that and do it in a less expensive manner. That's a question.
And I'd like to follow up on that too, just to understand where that's originating from. Is this for a class, high school, teachers? Like, just could we get some more explanation on 7.08, please?
Yes, this is the Diamond 6 contract, and actually, this is the administrative, it's for about 32 people for the leadership training that is received in the summer. So it's the summer leadership training. We can certainly revisit this and pull it off the agenda now, if that's at the pleasure of the board, to get more information. It is actually not involving any overnight accommodations for the reason of financial expense.
Is this for teachers or administrators or both? I guess that's kind of my question.
Administrators. It's in the summer.
I just want to add comment. Again, I've been through these things where I work. I think many of us have. And over the years, we've had them in nice places, and other years we've had to do them in a meeting room because we had budget cuts. So I just think that we should keep that in mind when we're deciding on this as well. You can still do it. Sometimes it's not as fun, but you still get to the point of what you need to do. Sorry, I'm very tired. I'm breaking up here.
And is this additive to the board administrative workshop? Or is this different than that? Like, what's the purpose?
Yes, it is. As we talked at the board workshop, it's a whole collective of a series of events to build leadership capacity. And we do one retreat in the summer with the administrators. It's approximately 32 people. And it would be going there for the training. Once again, we would hold the on-site the night before. That is not included in this. That would be us around here, for financial purposes, quite honestly. This is the comprehensive we've been doing. This is we do biannually. So the January with the board and administrators, and the summer with administrators. And it is a comprehensive leadership. The expectation is that everything builds off each other.
And you're recommending this contract?
Yes, I am.
Regina, can you explain the professional development with the Franklin Institute, Understanding the Brain?
Yes, that is the Great Valley Teacher Leadership Academy. It spans
In addition to
2
what we were
years.
talking about before?
That is.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, thank you. That
Regina,
is a comprehensive too. That's not a one day.
Could you touch base on the rationale and the importance of these types of initiatives?
Absolutely, and much of the board was involved in the leadership training. The idea is to have a focus and to improve collectively with shared vision and shared leadership. And I don't think it's as much about the location, and I really believe it is about investing in your leadership team and giving clear direction of expectations.
I have one question on the North Group consultant proposal. Is this a proposal for what we already did, or?
Yes, and it's an ongoing, it's a year, this is comprehensive of a year. So it's not only what we've done, but it's what is done with the administration as well.
Any other questions?
What are we looking at?
Are we pulling 7 point?
I was gonna say, what are we looking at approving?
No, well, it seems like 7.10 is going to stay in. Those questions were satisfied. There are these two contracts. Mr. Pollack, did you get your information? You're okay? Okay, the first contract, Mrs. Yuan, are you?
I'd like to pull 7.08 out.
Okay.
I'm not okay, I mean, if that's what we have to do to say, let's vote separately on it from the other items, that's what I prefer to do.
That's fine, and that's 7.08. Okay, if there's no other questions on the consent agenda.
I just got a comment on the one we were pulling out. It's all 30 administrators. We all reduce our professional development schedule to go to this, so we're all together. It's $250 a person. Now, we could eliminate that, and then everybody could willy-nilly pick little $350, $400 ones, and that's fine, and we would probably approve those on a per-thing basis. They wouldn't even rise to the level of being approved by the board. They'd just be approved by the superintendent. This is a big leadership development opportunity for the administrators. I mean, I don't care where it is. You could have it here. The problem with having it on site, as with any problem, is nobody is ever focused into the true leadership development when you're here, because somebody's always coming to get you for a phone call, or the mouse is running across the gym floor in the summer camp or something, and so everybody has to leave instead of people taking responsibility for being here. So just my 2 cents. I don't care if you pull it or not.
And I'm going to just add something to that, because I saw something on Monday on the History Channel, because it was President's Day, and all day long on the History Channel, they were coming on with blurbs about different presidents throughout history. And the very interesting fact was that in the height of the Second World War, Franklin Delano Roosevelt decided that he needed to take a vacation in the worst time, and he was highly criticized. He took 10 days off to go fishing for exactly the same reason as Chuck just said, because when you are doing what you're doing, a lot of times you just can't do what you need to do. And when he came back after that 10-day fishing trip, it was with a monumental idea that actually changed some of the things that occurred in the Second World War. So I think your point is well made. So we're going to move ahead. We will pull that out, though. We are going to vote on it, but we'll pull it out and we'll vote on it separately.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Do we need to vote on this? Because I'm not necessarily against having a retreat for all the administrators. This might be something that, like what Chuck just said, clarified some other thing. You know what, like, I'm just not sure that we're all in that same, like, if you think that there's a different venue, I'm not necessarily against having everyone do something if you're, I'm not saying
We need
as well.
to approve we have a contract in the packet that needs to either be approved or not.
But does it need to be approved or not at this meeting?
Yes.
Is my question.
Well, if you can say yes, if we need to move forward with the planning of it. So if you want to table it, then we would be bringing it back next month. I don't know that from now until next month, we would have additional information. And I don't know how much the cost would be cut if we had the same level of professional development on site. So we can certainly look at that if it's the location that is the issue. $250 per person for a 2-day retreat. If as part of our Act 93 agreement, not mine, but as part of the Act 93 agreement for the administrators, they are eligible for additional, as part of their contract or their agreement, it is written in their contract that they can take professional development, and it's much more costly than $250 a year.
Okay. I need a motion for the consent agenda items.
So I'm going to make a motion for 7.01, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, and 10? Or do I have to do the whole slate? Okay, there we go.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. I'd like to go back to 7.08. Financial approval, Diamond 6 contract for educational services. Do I have a motion?
Can I chime in? Is this the wrong time?
Make a motion first.
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Now you can chime in.
Do I have discussion?
Yes. We can vote on this tonight if it's what we have to do, but I think this is another example of if we have a guiding principle as a board in terms of like what guidance do we want to give our leadership team to say here's what leadership development we would expect to look like and here's an investment we're willing to make in leadership development over the course of a year. It helps the team make a plan that will be palatable by the time it gets to us in advance. I think waiting for them to bring us a plan and then saying, nope, not good enough, it's just not an effective way to help them plan effective professional development for their team. So whether it moves or doesn't move tonight, I'd like to see us have a dialogue about it before it comes to the table in the future.
Amy, or Mrs. Chain, I think that we did do that last year. Everything that's happening this year was in the plan from the superintendent last year. So this is just realizing what the board that was in place last year was actually following. So this is professional development that was established, that the administrator is recommending, and this is the second year. So I believe that it's being recommended because it's a value and it worked. So, any other discussion?
Yeah, last week we asked for some input and guidance on potential cuts. We didn't get it. And I mean, we got to stand somewhere. We as a board sit here at these meetings and wring our hands about financial spending, and we're not getting the help we need. We asked for it.
We didn't ask for cuts last week, Phil.
Yes, you sat at that microphone and asked to have a presentation to show, and we all did, ways to spend less money.
No,
Yes, we did.
No,
Yes, we
Dave,
did.
excuse
Yes, we
me.
did.
If you want to revisit the tape,
I
because.
don't, because I was here. I actually recall it from my memory.
Okay, we had a lengthy discussion. At the end, Dave said, okay, so you want to see cuts amounting to 1 million and 2 million, and I said, no, not really. And then the discussion ensued. What we asked for at the end, that Dave asked specifically for a playback as to what we could expect from the superintendent, is exactly what we got. Now, if you want to see something different.
I did ask for something different last week, and that was a consolidation. It's the same thing I asked for tonight. It's the same thing I've asked for the past 2 budget cycles. How are we consolidating services in a way that it's effective and costs less money? We didn't get the answer. I don't know any other way to stop wringing our hands and say, stop spending money that's short of doing something like this. Because this is what's going to happen. And I'm going to foresee what's going to happen is we're going to have these discussions in these meetings. We'll have our finance committee meeting, and before we know it, we'll be at budget cycle time to approve the budget, and we're just going to approve the budget. It's just going to go through. And that is my concern, because we talk, but nothing ever happens. The board, it's our job, this is our budget. The tax levy that we set forth, that's what we do as a board. That's what we're elected to do. And we're the bulwark. We represent the public, we represent everyone, all the stakeholders here. if we keep spending the way that we do, pulling stuff like this out is going to be like icing on a cake. I mean, you're going to have to do catastrophic deep dives and cutting things out. We did it 8 years ago, and I sat through those meetings, as some people here did too. If we keep spending the way we're spending, we're going to cycle back to that point, and it's going to be a huge problem, because it's not going to be surgical strikes. It's going to be hacking off things that we don't want to get rid of. And that is my concern, is we're not doing that now. So with regard to this, I did ask for it. I've asked for it in the past. I think that we're pulling this out. I'm just going to vote against it, and I'm sorry. I understand the concept of leadership, and I honestly believe that we spend other monies for leadership, but I just don't understand. We're spending money in ways we shouldn't be spending. It's just blank checks going out the door, and we're not standing as a bulwark, as a board, the way that we say we're going to, the way we speak into the microphone at these meetings, and then we just approve things as they go through. I can say the same thing with the teachers' contracts, the last early bird, that got passed through. There's a reason to do that. Understand that. Our hands are cuffed now because of that. That amount of spending, and the board, we sat back and just kind of let things happen, and we did what we did, but now we're fighting with that.
I take exception to that. We did not just ever sit back and do what we did. You can say you sat back and did what you did. I never sat back and did what I did. So please be respectful about what you say.
And
you
I
can
would expect the
disagree.
same. I can disagree with you, and I expect the same respect from you, Ellen.
Thank you, you'll get it.
Phil, can I ask you a clarifying question? Because I know where I'm at right now with some of this. I can actually understand the fact that we have this massive increase constantly in special ed, and it's mandated, and there's nothing, the special ed is mandated, the pension is mandated, the salaries are mandated unless we can negotiate a new contract or we go to status quo, and I get all those things, right? It's not like right now we can vote against something that we're contractually or legally obligated to, and I understand that, and I get that. And the things that we are not contractually obligated to are the things that were on that slide that we sat here as a majority and said, hey, you know what? We don't really want to lose these programs. So if you're, and she said to you, so STEAM is in the elementary school, they're leveled issues. So I'm not entirely sure what it is that you're looking for, because I want to understand that so that I can gain more clarity. I know that I don't understand the support structure and that we deliver things in a lean process. I get that. Like, I know that I don't understand that, and I've asked for clarification on that, and Regina says she can come back to me with that. When you say you want to make cuts in the budget, and you look at a list of things and you say, and she explains to you that it's different levels, and we say, what is it that you think you don't want? And you don't come back with something, I don't understand, and I need to understand as a fellow board member where your thinking is taking you. Because this, which is part of the reason why I was so adamant about saying, you know what? I had a moment of clarity last year when actually Bill Dyer said something to me that really resonated with me, and that's why I asked to have the difference explained. Why are we trying to increase this budget? What is in the budget increase? Because we can talk about saying it's $30 million, but you know what? I needed that moment of clarity to say, what is in this? Is this all special ed? Is this mandated stuff? Is this stuff that is on a wish list? Because you know what? We did make some pretty hard cuts. And you know what? We're paying for some of those because we didn't do them right. So I need to understand what's in your head, what you're thinking, so that I can get to that place and understand it.
Well, it's simple. We worked very hard as a board to ensure that when we get to the moment now, when we are saving $4.5 million plus for debt service, the plan was to use that in a way that helps set the district up long-term. We spent it all.
No,
we've earmarked all of it. We have earmarked all of it for spending.
For capital. You've been promising me for years that that is going to fund capital.
I made no promise to you for that. I
Okay,
think we looked at it as a way to pay for it.
board.
I think we talked about it as a way of using that, but what is the answer? We just saved $4.5 million out of debt service, and we're going to turn around and tax people even more after we've done all these machinations to save money? That doesn't make sense to me.
So we've not talked about the capital budget, and we need $4.5 million that we don't have every year for years because no one wants to talk about the capital budget. And I've been saying this to you as head of finance for a long time, as head of facilities, saying we need to talk about this capital budget. And what ended up happening at every single one of those meetings is we played kick the can, kick the can, kick the can. Jen, you know what? We're gonna have $4.5 million that's gonna come off when we hit this next year, and we will be able to refund capital, because we haven't really been putting any money in capital for literally years.
Mrs. Burrow, can you vote on 7.08,
Can I just ask you, are you
please?
ascribing that decision to me? Because I think we made the decision as a board.
I am so sorry. I am not, but I'm saying as head of finance, I am ascribing the decision to not necessarily take a look at capital to the head of finance. I am not ascribing that decision. That's a decision.
Why is
of the
that my
board.
responsibility if you're the head of
All right,
building and grounds? That doesn't make sense.
we're in the middle of voting. I think it is very important that we as board members understand where everyone is coming. We did poll this board tonight very affirmatively. Everyone saw that list. It's not the administrator's decision to cut. It is the board's decision. We have not instructed this administration. We sat here, went down the table, and every one of us, except Mrs. Ravenfeld, was very affirmative that we're not ready to give anything up on that list. That is not up to the administrator. It is up to us. We do need to try to understand one another's thought process, Phil. Jen's not wrong. We did see everyone answer that, and we heard your answer, and now we're getting something else. So I think we will visit trying to have that dialogue with one another where we can learn where one another is coming from, because I think that is really, really important for trust. So that being said,
This has nothing to do with trust. I don't, we're having a discussion about spending money. We're making a decision about whether we're going to spend it or we're not.
No, we've already made that. We made the decision about whether we were going to cut or not. Right now, the decision has not been made whether we're spending this money, because the dialogue is done. We're calling the vote. Mrs. Gunderson called a point of order. She wants the vote called. So we will call the vote on 7.08. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Okay, does not pass. Thank you. Next up, Chuck, if you can move that up, because I don't have a computer right now. Oh, I'm sorry, I had to give it to Eric. Financial approvals.
Motion to approve 8.01.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any dialogue, discussion?
Yeah, briefly, because I'm losing my voice here.
Go right ahead, Mrs.
I
Shaw.
just saw that it was a substitute teacher services contract, and I was just curious. I know we need substitute teachers, but why is there a contract now in the middle of the year, from now till the end of the year? Is there a rate increase? Was it negotiated? Why is there a contract coming into play now?
Actually, they asked to meet with us because of the efficiencies in Dr. Gafredo's department, and the way they've been able to streamline the process, we have a rate decrease. So this agreement reflects
This
rather
is actually a little different than that. That was different.
Is this the addendum?
The addendum is for going to an hourly rate for certain days for substitute teachers, because we found when we have late openings or early dismissals, we were still paying the full day. So at the request of Dr. Gafredo and the contractor, we would go down to an hourly pay on there, which would save us money.
which would save us money. I know the rate decreased, and it was quite substantial.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? 8.01 passes. 9.01 personnel approvals. Do I have a motion?
to approve 9.01.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Policy approvals, 10.01 for first reading. Steph?
I just wanted to mention that we're pulling policies 453 and 553, which is the tutoring for a fee one, because we need to make some more changes to the document that was posted here. So we'll add that next month.
Okay.
Was that in first reading?
Okay, so that was your second reading and approval, right? Okay, so,
Yeah, you just have to approve this one, 1002.
okay.
Motion to approve 10.02 and 10.03.
Second.
All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Any discussion on the policies? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Program approvals, 11 oh, there is nothing. 12, facilities, transportation, food services, we have nothing. That leads us to the presentation by the public on any other issues other than what is on the agenda.
Sally Campbell, Wellstown Township. First, I'd like to welcome the new board members. I know you're several weeks into it. You may be new, but I am not new. You can ask your fellow colleagues. As a parent who is very proud of the education my children have received in the district and still has one to go, I would just like to say, when you're in the public service industry, you get what you paid for. And given the climate that our teachers are in every single day in the classroom, they are worth their weight in gold to me as a parent. So teachers, hear me now, I have your back, always. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Sally. Mrs. Campbell.
Ted Leisering, White Horse Road, Berlin, Pennsylvania. I'd just like to follow up my comment on the budgeting process and also bring this board back to 2009, a decade ago, a very important time during a crisis. The budget process was different then. Bruce has gotten up here before, I've gotten up here, and you people, many of you on the board that have served back then and are serving now, remember the process, and it was more transparent. I'd just like to ask this board respectfully to ask, not just ask, demand that your superintendent and your CFO become transparent. Come to you, not with a list of programs, a list of services, but a list and the actual costs. You cannot have a debate. You cannot make a thoughtful discussion about a budget without knowing the numbers. And that's what you're trying to do now. And that is not good business. And the public is going to see it and know it. I think Mr. Ferre made some good points here. I think you need to follow through on them. Thank you.
Bruce Chambers, 17 James Thomas Road. I gave you some numbers before. I want to give you some more numbers. From 2012 to 2017, instruction costs have gone up 40%. Special ed, 74%. Gifted support, 137%. Pupil personnel, 31%. Attendance, whatever that is, has gone up 38%. Administration, 42%. Legal costs, 162%. The office of the superintendent went up 80%. Other administration went up 57%. How can you justify these increases? You can't. You can't just sit there and justify these. The administration has shown tonight that they are not willing to make any cuts. What they showed today was an embarrassment. If a CEO of a company had shown that to their board of directors, they would have been fired. There were no costs associated with that. There's plenty of things you can look at. I agree, there's a lot of mandates, but you can manage mandates. Mrs. Armstrong, you can manage them. There are other mandates you can do. You can manage them. You can control them. If you can't do that, let's just give up and go home. There's no discussion about personnel costs. There's no discussion about, do we need all these personnel? You're paying teachers $110,000 a year. Do they need an aide? Do we need all those aides? Do we need social workers when the county provides social workers? There's lots of different things you can look at. The administrative assistants Do they need to be employees of the school district where we pay them pensions and we pay them all the benefits that the teachers get? No, we don't. You can contract that out and save a bunch of money. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's lots of things you could do, and the superintendent has not presented you anything. There were no dollar figures presented tonight. Mary asked some good questions. Mrs. Chain did. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ravenfield. Asked some good questions. There were no answers with money. There was just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. There were no answers with money associated with it. You are not being served well by the administration. And you are supposed to be serving us who voted you in. You can't justify these costs. I'm sorry, I'm getting older. You can tell by my glasses. But I'm losing my patience. There's people like me and others who don't have really good jobs, who can't continue to afford to pay increased taxes. Tax base in Great Valley has skyrocketed in the last 5 years. It goes up over 2% a year. But yet you need more money than that? You don't have to do anything and you get a 2% tax increase. There's so many things you can do, and you're asking the administration to give them to you. They're giving you nothing. They're giving you nothing. You're not being served well by them. If they're not going to do it yourself. There's lots of things you could look at and demand it from them. The discussion tonight at times got a little crazy, but sometimes they have to be that way. I appreciate the vote on the one contract. It shows that some understand
Can you
the
wrap it
problems
up,
here.
please, Mr. Chambers?
I sure can. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Burrow. Yes, I can. I'm done. Thank you.
Anyone else? Steph?
I have a board comment, just to be putting it on the radar screen.
It's time for board comments.
Right.
Mrs. Gunderson?
I will be unable to attend the board meeting on April 16th. I'm announcing it early. I have a personal obligation that day, and I will not have internet, and I cannot dial in. So just so you know.
Okay, before we adjourn, just one, go right ahead. Any other board comments, Jennifer?
Because I want to apologize to Mr. Frey. I don't want you to think that, because I don't want to be attacking you, but I truly want to understand where your thought process is coming from. So if when we come back for the financial meeting, if you have anything more concrete, I would, or in between here and there, I'd love to talk about it, because I really do want to understand this, and I am not understanding what it is that you're looking for, given the dialogue that we had earlier and this dialogue, and it's truly coming from a place that I really want to understand. So I don't want you to think that that's coming from there. It's really coming from that place. And I just wanted to get that out publicly, because I'm not, it's not like I'm blaming and I feel like it came across that way, and I don't want it to come across that way. I truly want to understand where you're coming from.
Okay, so before we adjourn, just to recap, we did come up with a dialogue from the superintendent as to what plan she is recommending and why, very affirmatively. We also got the information that we had asked for. Again, board, this is not up to the administration to make these kind of cuts. The list was put up there exactly the way we asked for it last week. We did not ask for amounts of money. We asked the superintendent to come back to us with anything that we did not have to utilize, or what we could save, but still provide what we provide. There's some other information Dr. Speaker Polubinski is going to come back with for our next meeting. But again, the list was up there, and I'm saying this because everyone needs to understand. In order for this board to make those kind of cuts, that is a shift in culture. That needs to be talked about and considered prior to finding out what money is attached to it. So, Dr. Speaker Polubinski, could you please let us know what we can expect from you coming back at the next meeting?
We are going to be identifying the IU programs, what is in each of those buckets, and pull it out in that way, as well as drill down for the contracted services as well. I want to just clarify once again, as we've stated, I think, a couple times tonight, the associated cost of programs and services, what we were asked to say is what things were not required. And the directive that I received was, if there are any of these things that people want on the table, to please let us know, and I can come back with a dollar figure for those. If there is any desire to have a dollar figure for any of these, I just need to know that, because as I explained earlier, that request is not just staffing. If we're going to be transparent and we're going to be clear, then we need to make sure we're not only including the people, but we're including the ancillary costs that are associated with that. So if there are any of those areas, I heard individuals saying that they would like certain things looked at, and I tagged on my list some of the repetitive programming, and I can certainly clarify that more as far as the STEAM initiatives and those that would be associated with that acronym, as well as kindergarten. If there are any others, I'd be more than happy to get that information for you.
Sounds to me that that is comprehensive from the earlier discussion. Unless anybody has anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Good night, everyone. Thank you.